Thea in the DC Universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 201, Their Respective Results. Huh? There's a snake in the tree. I heard it's very nutritious. No problem, shoot it and take it. That squirrel over there looks adorable, its big tail seems nice to touch, and it even blinks. Forget it, let's spare its life. Thea had been basing her decisions on her preferences, prioritizing those with tender, nutritious meat. As for the cute ones, Thea's aggressive displays scared them away, while those with tougher skins were dealt with on a case-by-case basis. As she shot down another fox that kept circling her prey, the female warrior checked the sky and told her it was almost time to return. Thea looked up at the sun through the trees, but couldn't see any difference. How did they know the time? Confused, they began to clean up the scene. There was too much prey, and they were completely short-handed, so they had to carry it out bit by bit, like ants moving house. When they were still more than a mile from the exit, a resounding whistle was heard from outside the forest. It's the arrows. They've already emerged from the dense forest. Let's hurry up, a female warrior said, looking at the mountain of prey with a hint of distress. She also wanted to speed up. By then, the dense forest was already showing the signs of dusk. Insects and flies, attracted by the strong smell of blood, rushed up to get a piece of the meat. Xia, covered in blood, was being annoyed by the buzzing insects. Can we get a few more people to help? Xia swatted a mosquito that was circling her and asked for their opinion. They discussed quietly. In the past, their hunts were all about showing off their prowess, targeting ferocious forest beasts that could be carried away by 3 or 2 people. This was the first time they had encountered such a near-mass slaughter as Xia's. In the end, they decided that 2 of them would remain to guard the area while the other went out to fetch help. Help arrived quickly, led by Diana. Seeing the pile of prey on the ground, she immediately understood Thea's idea, having experienced the sacrifice last night. It looked like they all tasted delicious. Strength in numbers is always true, especially with Diana and Thea, 2 guys with significantly higher strength scores. More than a dozen people worked together to carry the prey out of the dense forest. Outside the woods, many people were pointing and talking at the black, sturdy woman, their expressions ranging from admiration to envy. The black, sturdy woman's appearance at the moment was far from good. Half her body was covered in blood and half in mud, and she looked like she'd just finished wrestling, reeking of dirt. However, she looked quite energetic, sitting carefree on her prey. The black woman, practicing traditional Amazonian hunting, slew a bear that appeared to weigh over 700 pounds. Of course, this black, imposing bear wasn't the cute woman, but a ferocious American bear. Scars covered its face, neck, and stomach, revealing the ferocious fight between the two, which ultimately ended in the black woman's victory. As if to demonstrate her prowess, the bear's claws left 3 deep, bloody scratches on her shoulder, ripping through her metal half-plate armor. The black woman had urgently treated the wounds, applying an unknown herb but leaving them unbandaged, and blood still seeped from them. She had arrived nearly half an hour before Thea, nervously watching the possible exits. When she saw a female warrior emerge carrying a wild boar, she breathed a sigh of relief. She had fought tooth and nail to achieve a good result. Who would have the temerity to challenge a bear? But her good mood didn't last long. Another female warrior emerged, carrying a large bunch of eagles. How could there be so many different species of eagles in this forest? The dark-skinned woman's heart skipped a beat. Anyone with eyes could tell these eagles had been shot, which was in line with Artemis's original purpose, hunting. The dark-skinned woman recalled her fight with a black bear, nearly killing it with her fists. This had nothing to do with hunting. Would this give her opponent an excuse to attack her? Her mind raced. One moment, the priests declared her the winner, while her opponent used their doctrine to attack her, and she triumphed amidst the contempt of her tribe. The next, everyone unanimously agreed that she had lost, leaving Paradise Island in disgrace, destined for the bleak fate of the outside world. A tangle of thoughts washed over her, and even the black bear's corpse, sitting up, felt less comfortable, staring at the exit, waiting for her opponent to appear. The next scene confirmed the black and strong woman's guess. The other party had really hunted a lot of animals. She saw wild boars, eagles, foxes, snakes, and a silver wolf with very smooth fur. Just as she was concentrating on staring at every figure coming out of the woods, looking for her opponent, she saw Miss Xia coming out with light steps, dragging a blueberry tree in her left hand and grabbing 2 spoon chickens in her right hand. The black and strong woman almost spit out a mouthful of blood. Why did you come out with fruits? Shouldn't you be carrying tigers and cheetahs? And what are these 2 chickens? Could it be that this is not a spoon chicken? This is the indescribable creature that has become a spirit in the legend, abbreviated as chicken spirit? When she looked at Xia, Xia also saw her and the black bear she was sitting on. Even Xia had to admit that the black and strong woman was really good. It was a bit unfair that she lost to her with a javelin. Her personal strength was quite good, and Xia would have a hard time fighting this bear. That outsider has hunted so many animals. Her archery must be exceptional. I think Artemis's prowess is the one to be celebrated. Large-scale hunting doesn't conform to our tradition. Nonsense. This is the true teaching of the goddess of the hunt. Look at those wounds, they're all caused by sharp arrows. I'd say the outsider has definitely won this fight. The chatter around them reached the ears of the parties involved, and the dark-skinned woman's face grew increasingly gloomy. From the voices in the crowd, she could roughly tell that her and her opponent were equally supportive, indicating that her opponent already had half the support. Thea had only been here a few days, and what about her? She'd lived on the island for 5,000 years, and yet they had a different base and were still equally supportive? This was a serious problem. The simple-minded, strong-limbed dark-skinned woman could think of the same problem as the 3 cunning priests. The 3 of them were a little annoyed when they saw this result. Knowing the doctrine, they were sure that if the goddess was still alive, it would definitely be someone like Xia who would please the goddess. After all, beating a bear to death with a big stick had nothing to do with the elegant hunting goddess. Although Xia had a lot of blood on her body, it was obviously the blood of the prey, which was much better looking than the image of the black and strong woman who was fished out of the mud. Chapter 202. The Oracle is coming? But they couldn't just declare Thea the winner. The dark, muscular woman was doomed, and there wouldn't even be a third match. The 3 racked their brains, coming up with excuses. She's disqualified for killing too many people. You're nuts. We don't have a rule against killing. Then say she used more arrows than the required number. Do we have a set number of arrows? The 3 pondered, but couldn't find any flaws in the doctrine. Furthermore, their understanding of the phrasing wasn't clear whether it came from the goddess or them. Many of the female warriors present had previously been priestesses, only to be re-employed by Hippolyta and reclassified as warriors. Their familiarity with the doctrine wasn't necessarily any less than theirs. If they were caught spouting nonsense, they wouldn't even have the chance to fight for power, and they wouldn't even have their jobs. They'd been comfortably at home for 5,000 years, and didn't want to switch to warrior roles. Finally, the oldest priestess made up her mind and whispered something in the ear of the priest who'd withheld Thea's breakfast. The more she listened, the more stunned she became. Finally, with a grim expression, she asked, "Is it possible?" Receiving an affirmative answer, she took a deep breath, stepped to the front of the group as if carrying a heavy burden, cleared her throat, and announced loudly, "Artemis's oracle has been delivered. The goddess wishes for a more exciting match. This will be considered a draw." This was their unintended solution. The goddess wouldn't know anyway. The final word is ours. Our word is ours. You didn't hear it? That proves you're not devout enough. Sure enough, the crowd erupted in excitement at her refusal to mention the winner, her reckless blaming of the outcome on the goddess. Thankfully, they were all civilized, and no one raised a stone to protest her oracle, which gave the priestess, who had announced the shocking news, a sigh of relief. No one protested, but the discussion was inevitable, and she didn't have the courage to shout. Everyone shut up and listened. Oracle? Did you see that? How could I not see it? Their faces are so ugly. They're all vying for power over the respected queen, Alice. They should at least acknowledge Artemis's achievements. The outsiders have also done well, and these 2 are just being ignored. Paradise Island still has a strong democratic atmosphere. The female warriors are not all Musliman. After so many years, they still have a basic understanding of right and wrong. Whether supporting Thea or Artemis, everyone expressed dissatisfaction with the practice of simply shifting the blame to the gods. Hippolyta, the leader of the faction, naturally heard the discussions and covered her mouth, pretending to be shocked by the news. In fact, she was almost smiling, and a huge smile formed on her lips, but she covered it with a feigned surprise. Diana, with her fiery temper, was furious. On the one hand, she felt sorry for her friend, but on the other hand, she believed that these three people were blaspheming the gods. As a demigod, she had the final say on whether there was a miracle at the scene. But aside from the divine fluctuations emanating from herself and Thea, there wasn't even a hint of the supernatural. These people's actions were undoubtedly blasphemous. It was simply unforgivable. Thea didn't know why she was so angry all of a sudden. She thought she was trying to stand up for herself and was deeply moved. She pulled her hard, afraid she would charge and chop down the three old men. The bad priest waited until the chatter subsided a little, then respectfully asked Hippolyta, "Does the queen have any objections?" The queen replied, "Of course not. If you do this twice, your reputation will plummet." Didn't you see the discontent on the face of the strong black woman, believing she was being treated unfairly and her reputation was affected? Perhaps if it happened again, Hippolyta could truly rule Paradise Island. She nodded solemnly, indicating that she had nothing to say. "You call it an oracle, so let it be this time." Just as she was about to adjourn the meeting, Thea finally spoke up about this match that had inexplicably landed her in a lurch. "Wait, I have questions." It was perfectly natural for her to have questions. It would be strange if she didn't. At least the bad priestess thought, if she'd been treated this unfairly, she'd have started a fight long ago. This outsider was quite well-mannered. In fact, it wasn't just her, the other female warriors were all waiting intently for her to speak out. Some, fearless enough, were secretly cheering her on. Thoughts like, "Kill these old bastards. If you start a fight, I'll kick your ass too," crossed many people's minds. "Did you say the oracle just came?" Thea shouted. Having finished speaking in public, the bad priestess, not yet thick-skinned enough to backtrack, nodded. "Yes, the oracle wishes for a more exciting match." That was true, that was exactly what she had said. The bad priestess could only nod again. Shia smiled innocently. "Since we've caught the spirit's attention, we can't keep it waiting any longer. I propose that we proceed to the third round immediately." Wow, a flurry of incoherent voices echoed throughout the room. "That makes sense, that's right. We should definitely start right away." Shia's counterattack disrupted the three's plans. Their heads buzzed as they heard her words. They exchanged a few quick glances. Damn it. Eye contact can't convey anything. Regardless of the criticism, the three gathered together to chat. What should they do? This question flickered in their eyes. Shia's question hit the nail on the head. It was absolutely right. The spirit was watching, and with our piety, we couldn't keep it waiting. So, let's move on to the next round. They couldn't say the spirit had just left the oracle and run away. Now the spirit wasn't home? This was ridiculous. Even the simple folks on their own island couldn't be fooled, let alone the more sophisticated outsiders. Their own gods were practically hanging on by a thread. Even at the height of their powers, the Greek gods were known for playing around with the mortal world, not engaging in serious business. Far from being overwhelmed with affairs, it was sheer nonsense to claim the gods were incredibly busy. As for denying the oracle, it was impossible. Words spoken, words spilled. Even if you take them back, you can't just take them back 2 minutes after they were spoken, right? The three old faces hadn't yet achieved invulnerability, and they still had a certain sense of shame. After much deliberation, they finally decided to do as she wished. The competition continued. As for what to compete, the three were at a loss. We'd competed in strength, we'd competed in skill. But what other specialties could we compete for on Paradise Island? In their anxious glances, the three men saw more and more female warriors pointing and commenting on them. Needless to say, they weren't praising their devout faith or honesty. Especially Artemis's look full of distrust hurt the three of them. Damn it, we spent so much time thinking just for you. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203. The third game begins. If the black strong woman looked at them like this in the past, they would have given up long ago. Who are you trying to please, you rough guy? But the situation is different now. They have to fight for a face. No matter what their original purpose was, they have to drag the black strong woman into the fight. They have been forced into a corner. If they want to live in peace, they have to fight. But they can say big words, but it is too difficult to put them into practice. The black strong woman is a typical Amazon warrior. She can do nothing but fight and kill. Now that they have competed in strength and skills, do they have to fight each other? The three of them shook their heads at the same time. Xia's pretending to be a pig and eating the tiger left a deep impression on the three of them. Is she a fighting master? The old priestess in the lead pondered deeply. Seeing the puzzled looks from the warriors around her, she suddenly had a brilliant idea. She whispered to the two of them. There was no need for discussion, at least she had a plan. The other two were frantic with the situation. Their popularity plummeted with each passing second, and any solution was better than nothing. This time, the bad priestess refused to read the oracle. With so many people watching, the three of them immediately packaged their idea as an oracle. Did they think these 1,000 people were fools? The old priestess had no choice but to act in person. She didn't have the guts to pretend to be the oracle in plain sight. She feared being stoned to death by the angry warriors. So, with some quick wit, she disguised their idea. Through our interpretation of the oracle, we believe the gods are preparing to personally assess the third competition. We will then proceed to the temple for the final match. Her words were quite eloquent. Fearing the gods, the warriors, initially agitated, were subdued. Is there really an oracle? Are they lying? Let's wait and see. The warriors were instantly stunned by her brazen attempt to manipulate the situation. Even Thea and Diana were taken aback. What was going on? Had the oracle really just appeared? They exchanged a bewildered glance. Hippolyta, who had been chatting with them for over 5,000 years, wasn't so easily fooled. She feigned excitement and asked in the tone of a devoted fan, "What did the gods say? Can I go and hear it for myself?" She was the queen, after all, and she had a close relationship with Zeus. The priests couldn't refuse. Even if Artemis herself descended, Hippolyta wouldn't be afraid of her, given her status. Her mere request to observe was undeniable. The old priest acquiesced to Hippolyta's suggestion, evasively replying, "The oracle is cryptic. Let's not keep the gods waiting. Let's go quickly." A huge question immediately filled the minds of the discerning few. What were they planning? Thea, naturally one of the discerning few, also didn't understand what these old men were talking about, but the perplexed look on the dark-skinned woman's face made it clear she had no idea what the competition was about. Fair enough. Thea just wanted to end this farce quickly. If you want to fight Hippolyta for power, go ahead and do it. Why involve me? I still have to get back to kneading dough. Knowing Diana was going to, she felt even more relieved. These three old men couldn't possibly summon Ares, could they? Nothing to fear, she calmly followed the three. As they walked, she pulled a handful of blueberries from her bag and handed them to Diana. The two of them followed the main group leisurely, as if on a picnic. Perhaps it was because the company of the good made the good, but after 2 days of following her, Diana had become noticeably more brazen. She took the food and devoured it without hesitation. Hippolyta and Antiope, who had been watching them, were each lost in thought, their own thoughts unspoken. The distance from the dense forest to the temple in the center of the island was quite a distance. Seeing everyone walking in a solemn manner, Thea didn't dare mention riding there. On the way, she spotted an apple tree and, without a word, broke the branches with a punch, gathering 7 or 8 to eat on the way. Several faction leaders, driven by their own agenda, pretended not to notice. Many of the warriors witnessed this, though most ignored it. A few, believing she was demonstrating her prowess, cheered loudly. This made Thea feel a little embarrassed. With everyone cheering, it would be inappropriate to eat alone. Embracing the spirit of sharing, she picked up a few apples and tossed them to the loudest cheering ones, prompting another round of cheers. Those who had received her apples slowed down their pace and joined the two of them. They began discussing how Thea had killed her massive prey. She then played a cameo from the legend of the Condor heroes, piercing an eagle, drawn to her by the mystical Horus. This further ignited the excitement of the onlookers, and more women slowed down their pace to join her ranks to witness her incredible archery skills. Thea accepted the offer, shooting 2 more sparrowhawks in public, drawing thunderous cheers. Even Diana was eager to try. Their festive jubilation contrasted with the sullen expressions of the priests. After Thea shot another gray eagle, Antiope, the general of Paradise Island, couldn't resist and turned to challenge her in a duel of archery. It was undeniable that Antiope's archery skills far surpassed her spearmanship, and Thea was evenly matched. They progressed from shooting dead animals to live ones, then two upward firing, volleying, and 3 arrow salvos, displaying a full range of archery skills, like a competition of flower arrows. Isn't it the gunpowder age out there? Why do you specialize in archery? Antiope was delighted. The female warriors of Paradise Island weren't opposed to bows and arrows, but they valued the ethos of fierce, knife-slashing combat, not particularly keen on long-range attacks. Meeting Thea, a member of a family of archers, naturally felt a surprising rapport, a sign of respect between the two. Of course, Thea couldn't say that both her father and brother were archery masters, nor could she reveal too many details about the future. She could only vaguely explain, bows and arrows can give me courage and protect my city from bad guys. Gunpowder can't do that. Gunpowder can only increase the killing, hey? Diana, listen to me, Thea's philosophy is different from yours, but equally noble. This is the concept of protection I mentioned to you. It is not unique. You should. Antiope was deeply impressed by her half-true and half-false words. Thinking of the naughty child she had taught, she turned around and began to discuss with Diana whether there was any room for improvement in her life principles. Chapter 204 Diana's God-killing sword. Thea didn't have many beliefs or ideals to ponder. She simply wanted her family to survive the future chaos of those idiots, and of course, it would be better if they could live comfortably. Antiope went to teach the child, and Thea was once again surrounded by a swarm of innocent female warriors who had lived for 5,000 years. Archery required talent and some subtle tricks, so she couldn't teach them. However, she could pass on the millennia of human combat experience she had brought from the outside world. She found a few moves that closely resembled their own styles and taught them. The female warriors, regardless of Thea's age, were only a fraction of theirs, and they enthusiastically learned. By the time they reached the temple entrance, Thea had gathered hundreds of people. Diana, fed up with her aunt's nagging, dragged Thea into another fight, claiming to prove her ideals but actually annoyed by the nagging. Neither of them took it seriously, it was pure play, as they walked for miles, stopping and starting. While attracting attention, people ahead kept deliberately falling behind and coming up to watch them closely. The entire procession moved in a strangely odd manner. The large group at the front moved in relatively orderly formation, though occasionally someone would look back. The group behind them was much more lively, like a festival, with cheers and shouts unceasing, punctuated by the clash of weapons, a scene that made the group of female warriors, for whom combat was their life's work, rejoice. When the front group paused, they realized they had reached the temple entrance. We're here. Time flies, oh no. Miss Shaw has used up a lot of energy. Will this affect the upcoming competition? No wonder those old guys didn't stop us. They're so cunning. After this brawl, many people's impression of Shaw had improved. Not completely devoted, but at least friendly. Many realized they should have conserved their energy for the journey, but it was clear that Shaw hadn't stopped at all. Diana felt a pang of regret. All the female warriors on this island had been adults since they became conscious, but she had grown up from childhood. She had never had a playmate, and she had just had so much fun playing and joking with Thea. Now, realizing she seemed to be holding back, she felt a surge of remorse. Thea patted her shoulder, assuring her that she was fine, saying she could easily sustain 3 days of this low-intensity exertion. Diana didn't let her comfort slacken, but instead waited intently for the priest's instructions regarding the third match. The temple's interior is limited, so contestants are welcome to enter. Oh, and Her Majesty the Queen can also come and watch, the old priest said calmly. The Amazons didn't object. The temple area had originally been ample, but over the past 5,000 years, Hippolyta had encroached on it under various pretexts, one day building 2 houses, claiming to improve the warriors' accommodations, the next, enclosing a large area for horse racing. The temple's current size had shrunk dramatically, barely accommodating around 200 visitors at a time. Any more would have been incredibly crowded. Without waiting for them to react, the 3 priests led the way inside, followed closely by the Queen, Antiope, and the dark-skinned woman. Thea sighed and followed suit, while Diana calmly accompanied her. Blessed by the gods, no one could stop her. The female warriors publicly selected 100 men to enter the temple. The age of the gods was over, that was Thea's first impression upon entering the temple. The statues of the 12 gods, once imbued with the solemn aura, were now huddled together, shoulder to shoulder and foot to foot, making the space seem cramped and small. Though the statues brimmed with power and beauty, Thea sensed no divine power, only a heavy, gloomy air. Could there be hidden equipment here? The protagonist's cheat codes were usually hidden within the statues. Thea secretly scanned the area with the eye of Horus and nearly laughed out loud when she saw something. She saw signs of human habitation in the temple's backyard. Needless to say, this was where the priests slept and ate. This was perfectly normal. Priests were human, too. They needed to eat and sleep. But Thea saw what looked like dried sweet potatoes neatly lined up inside their room. This nearly made her laugh out loud. It turned out I wasn't the only one who thought the food was bad, but they were secretly improving it. Hey! Don't use your powers recklessly, Diana nudged her. Sorry, Thea muttered a quick apology. Using the power of a foreign god in someone else's temple, are you sure you're not here to cause trouble? And these Greek gods weren't dead, they were just too injured to move. Even after apologizing, she couldn't help but whisper her findings to Diana. Diana's expression was distorted, her serious face contorted. She gave Thea a strange look, clutching her mouth tightly, and ducked her head, not wanting to look at the three old priests on the stage, fearing she'd burst out laughing. The old priest didn't linger in the temple for long, instead heading for a side door. Aren't we competing in the temple? Where are we going? Thea whispered to Diana. Looks like we're heading to the tower. A tower? Seeing Diana didn't say anything, Thea put aside her doubts and followed the others. Bang! The guard at the tower pushed open the thick wooden door, and the old priest, ignoring the dust that fell from it, rushed in first. Hiss! Upon entering the tower, Thea's first sight was the sword in the center of the room. It was a typical Greek-style forging, 60 centimeters long, with a flame-shaped guard on the hilt that gripped the blade tightly, its entire blade gleaming golden. Could this be the so-called Godslayer sword with 999 increased attack power that Hippolyta had tricked Diana into believing? However, the divine power in this tower was so concentrated that Thea could sense some of the gods were still lingering there. She didn't dare to use her divine eyes to observe. She simply felt that the divine power on the sword was a little too dazzling. Even her eye of Horus was instantly attracted to it. This was not right. In the original story, Eris easily shattered it. Does this mean it's a fake sword? Was the real sword corrupted by Hippolyta? Thea could only say that this way of caring for her children was truly unique. As the priests advanced, Thea saw a vast array of divine equipment, the future Diana's shield and the lasso of truth, and many other pieces of equipment she couldn't name. What a pity. Such a pity. If only they were all mine. The further she went, the stronger the feeling of being watched by the gods. Even Horus could ask his own father for divine power. He was only a secondary deity. There were a host of major gods, including the unfathomable god King Zeus. Even if Superman, now in his evil form, flew over, he couldn't forcefully seize it. Miss Thea could only watch. Chapter 205 said Elk. Thea's itching to see what was happening along the way was unbearable. Eventually, she stopped looking and followed them around, circling back and forth, her eyes fixed on the ground. From the outside, the tower only covered about 100 square meters, but the interior was incredibly spacious. Walking around, it felt endlessly vast. Could it be some kind of special magic? Thea kept scanning her surroundings, but sadly, she couldn't see anything. After the group had unnaturally climbed a hill and crossed two small rivers inside the tower, they stopped at a shallow, grassy beach dotted with a few low trees. The entire layout was clearly not natural, but clearly the product of careful planning. A solitary silver-white elk lay on the shore. At the sound of their footsteps, it didn't look up, but its ears trembled slightly, as if trying to identify them. This is Artemis's messenger. It has accompanied the moon goddess for countless years. Your third test is to earn its approval. Who'll go first? The old priest introduced with some pride, but he was actually introducing Thea. The Amazons were all familiar with the elk. Several former priests who had transitioned to warrior status had fed it before. Thea was the only one who was truly unfamiliar with it. Although the dark-skinned woman wasn't familiar with the elk, she had at least spent so many years with it, bearing the name of Artemis, and had dealt with it before, so she was somewhat familiar with it, right? Compared to Thea, who was seeing it for the first time, her advantage was immense. The old priest wanted to praise his own cleverness. I'm so clever. I'm not competing with you in strength or skill. Your immense martial arts skills are useless. We're competing in local knowledge and connections. Her thoughts couldn't be hidden from anyone, and she didn't want to. What if she guessed it? As long as the dark-skinned woman won this match, their record would be a draw, with one win and one loss each, and the overall score would remain tied. A few words of praise would be enough to put the matter behind them. As for trouble with Hippolyta, they could find another time. There was plenty of time anyway. You're going too far. You're blatantly bullying Thea, Diana was the first to protest. Blessed with Athena's wisdom, she might be a little immature in her dealings with people, but she was no fool. The priest's trick was too obvious. It would be absurd not to notice. Several female warriors also protested. It wasn't because of their deep friendship with Thea, but because they felt this so-called competition was unfair. Even the dark-skinned woman was visibly ashamed. After such a shameless victory, how could she still face the world? The old priestess had truly mastered the art of a golden mask and iron skin. Say whatever you want, I'm just like that. Come and bite me if you don't agree. Smiling, he turned to Hippolyta and asked, Your Majesty, are you okay with this? Hippolyta carefully observed the mood of the crowd. Dissatisfaction dominated, but a few simply looked ashamed. If she launched a sudden attack, it was doubtful whether these people would support her. Her mindset was similar to the old priest's, though time was long, and the conflict needed to be kept within a certain range. She had made up her mind to acquiesce to the match and compensate Thea individually later. She had quite a few valuable items in her personal collection. Zeus had been kind to her. His mistress, the Lord God King, had given her precious gifts back then. Divine artifacts were rare in the outside world, but to Hippolyta, they were just commonplace. But acquiescing was enough, but expecting her to endorse a few priests was impossible. She gazed at the distant mountains, silent, as if she hadn't heard. The old priestess guessed her thoughts, sneered inwardly, and turned back to say, The messenger is exhausted. Who'll go first? The dark-skinned woman didn't dare meet Thea's gaze. She lowered her head and muffled, I'll go first. It wasn't clear whether she was demonstrating to Thea or simply wanted to quickly end this farce that violated her warrior's honor. She walked softly around to the shrubs flanking the shallows, picked a few branches with tender leaves, and broke them off. She slowly approached the elk, making what she considered to be a kindly sound, but to Thea it sounded like feeding a pig. Lulolulol, come and eat, ululolulol. It was clear this wasn't new to the dark-skinned woman. Her movements were skillful and natural, and the elk, in a gesture of courtesy, raised its head slightly and took a few bites of the tender leaves brought to its mouth. Then, perhaps satisfied or perhaps understanding their intentions, it nodded gently. This action brought a sigh of relief to the dark-skinned woman, but she felt a mixture of relief and immense shame. She didn't return to the group, but sat alone on the grass, silent and speechless. Miss Xia, it's your turn. Come on, the old priest said with a smile. Xia gave her a middle finger in annoyance. Although the old priest didn't understand the gesture, she knew it wasn't a compliment. She waited for Xia to make a fool of herself with a forced smile. Shall I pick some leaves to feed it? Xia walked in and realized that the elk was very old. Compared to the other animals on the island that were constantly reborn, it didn't enjoy the immortality magic of Paradise Island. It seemed that every moment it consumed its own lifespan, and the years had left heavy marks on its body. Its eyes, which should have been clear and transparent, were now cloudy. It could not see. The horns that had defeated countless powerful enemies were still as sharp as a knife, but the goddess's slumber had also taken away its fighting spirit. The invasion of time had completely robbed it of its former courage. Its soul was too exhausted. It was wasting its lifespan. It was seeking death. These thoughts surged through Thea's mind, but she could sense the elk's bitterness. Its immense fighting power was meaningless, its fate utterly meaningless, its only hope, to wait its final moments alone. Why are you so sad? How can I help you? Thea ignored the sharp, sword-like horns, half knelt beside the elk, and gently stroked its cheek, speaking slowly but firmly. The elk hadn't noticed her at first, believing it was just one of the priests. But as Thea spoke, it sensed something different. These weren't those complex priests. Who was this? Where did this sense of familiarity come from? It strained its head, its gray eyes straining to see the face of the person before it. Whoa! The crowd erupted in a flurry of unintelligible noises. The divine messenger had actually reacted to this outsider. This was a first in their thousands of years. The priests felt thunder rolling in their hearts, accompanied by the sound of thousands of horses galloping. Of course. They were the ones struck by the lightning and trampled by the thousands of horses. They looked at each other and saw the fear in their companions' eyes. No way? Again? Why do I say again? This is not in the script. Chapter 206 Artemis. Thea didn't have time to consider their feelings. She only felt a faint connection between her and the elk. It wasn't that they knew each other before, but rather a bond deep within their blood. How did this bond form between us? Thea was slightly shocked by her own thought. Perhaps it was because of the unicorn? Perhaps they were distant relatives? A relatively plausible explanation flashed through her mind. She didn't understand, and the elk didn't understand how this connection came about. She just wanted to see her face clearly with her cloudy eyes. So sad. The signal sent by this made Thea feel a little sad. She made up her mind, holding the elk's head with both hands and pressing her forehead against it, preparing to transfer some of her eye power to restore the elk's sight. Don't, Diana said a word before she stopped, unsure whether to stop or agree, her face flushing with anxiety. What is she doing? Antiope observed a mysterious light flickering between Thea and the elk, and something she couldn't understand swirling around it, leaving her perplexed. Seeing Diana's anxious cries, she whispered. Diana hesitated for a long time before whispering, she's transferring her divine power. Is she also a child of God? Given the prevailing values of Paradise Island, the term instantly occurred to her. As for Godslayer, it simply wasn't in her vocabulary. She's a noble child of God, Diana declared with absolute certainty, her spirit of sacrifice, protection, and devotion intensifying several points. In reality, Thea wasn't nearly as noble as she'd imagined. She could lend a hand when seeing someone in need, but she wasn't prepared to sacrifice herself for that. Horus himself was renowned among the gods for his exceptional vision. His eye power was nearly limitless, reaching the very bottom of the abyss. Although only one eye remained, the transfer of his eye power would only cause Thea's eyes to ache for a few days, a minor impact. Furthermore, the elk itself possessed divine power. It was just that, previously, its desperate desire for death had prevented it from receiving immediate treatment when its eyes were damaged. Now, with Thea's transfer of eye power and its own active healing, the mist in its eyes visibly dissipated. Upon regaining vision, the first thing it saw was Thea, and it nuzzled her cheek affectionately. Thea, having overused her eye power, felt her eyes begin to soar. Rubbing her eyes, a few tears streamed down her cheeks. To the inexperienced young women like Diana, this scene was a scene of overflowing joy, a single man and a deer, both regaining their sight. The female warrior's eyes flushed. Just as Thea was about to turn and call out to the evil priests, "Look, I've passed, haven't I? What else do you have to say?" she suddenly felt the elk signal her, "Come, follow me." Seeing her crouched in a daze, the elk bit her sleeve and dragged her inside. Don't pull, I'm going with you." The creature's strength was incredible, a conservative estimate put it at over a ton, and it nearly knocked Thea over. What was it doing? After repeated signals, the elk didn't respond, merely gesturing to follow. Sighing, Thea reluctantly followed it inside. Those watching were puzzled as to where the elk was taking Thea. Diana, possessed of infinite courage, took the lead, and the queen and Antiope, fearing for her safety, followed suit. "You can't go there. That's the eternal resting place of the gods," the old priest shouted sternly at Thea. The elk's fangs bared in response, and Thea gave him a middle finger. Seeing the elk's sharp horns, the old priest felt a pang of fear. Unlike the animals on the island who constantly reborn, Amazons were dead. The gods had granted them eternal life, not the power of unlimited resurrection. A single stab from the elk would mean true death. They weren't actually afraid of death, but the reputation of being killed by a divine messenger was too unbearable, making them seem like they'd committed some unforgivable sin. Initially, they merely sought to reclaim some of their voice, a far cry from blasphemy. Even Hippolyta, the god king's mistress, was cautiously treading the fine line, so they wouldn't dare cross the line. The three could only watch in fear as Thea vanished from view. As for Diana, the others didn't dare to stop her. The gods' blessings were no joke, and many of these major deities were her brothers and sisters. She could freely wander through all the temples, and the gods wouldn't mind, let alone their three servants. The queen's status was similar, she didn't even glance at the three priests, calmly walking past. Antiope said nothing, simply drawing her sword and striking a blow as she followed her sister. Seeing the female warriors also heading inside, the three priests were furious. "You can't go in, I have the right to go in, I still hold a divine name." The dark, sturdy woman looked at the three old men sternly, her heart broken at the mention of the divine name. Even a blind man could see that Thea had triumphed decisively in this contest, and it was all their fault that they had instigated her to cause trouble. Otherwise, How could she have ended up in this state? Without waiting for a reply, she waved her hand and, like a black bear, headed inside. The remaining female warriors had no such compelling reason, so they could only stop and gaze from afar under the priest's stern gaze. The elk, pulling Thea along, walked a short distance before stopping in front of a cave and observing the group following closely behind. It treated Diana most favorably, nudging her arm and nodding slightly to the queen. As for the others, it ignored them all. Lowering its head, it scratched a deep groove in the ground with its sharp horn, signaling them not to follow, and then pulled Thea into the cave. Everyone understood what this meant: no admission for outsiders. Even though you, Diana, are the goddess's sister, and we're close, you're not allowed in. Thea could only greet her and follow the elk into the cave. The moment her left foot entered, she felt something was amiss. Having experienced the explosion of the Eye of the Orion, she immediately sensed a drastic shift in her surroundings. A vast stream of time washed over her. Could it be? Had I transmigrated again? But she soon realized she was still in the original 1918 time frame, only space had shifted dramatically, transporting her to a more conceptual place. There was no definition of time or space, only silence and eternity. Hello, young time traveler, I'm Artemis. Just as Thea surveyed her surroundings, a vague humanoid figure appeared in the open space to her left. The figure was so elusive and hazy that it was hard to discern its features, as if it could be blown away by the wind. Chapter 207 The Goddess's Help. Oh my goodness, isn't this guy dead? He's still visible. Could this space be? As if anticipating her confusion, the humanoid figure continued, you are now in a higher dimensional plane that must rely on the original space-time. What you see is my shadow, projected from the past. The figure's words were so clear, so Xia naturally had to show respect. Bowing, Your Majesty, why have you summoned me here? The figure didn't directly answer her question. Instead, it extended its hand and made a unique sign, opening a spatial passage. The elderly elk instantly arrived at its side, embracing it with deep affection. Xia didn't interrupt their reunion. Or maybe it wasn't even a reunion, just a brief encounter in time? Her English vocabulary was limited, and she didn't know how to describe it. She could only watch silently. Time seemed to pass for an eternity, yet it also seemed so short. When the goddess's figure patted the elk's head and it stood back up, Xia quickly focused her attention, knowing it was her turn. The goddess's shadowy figure nodded slightly. Time traveler, thank you for reuniting us. Xia's mind was swirling with questions. What had I done? Wasn't it this deer that dragged me in? No, the goddess chose her words carefully, as if wanting to cut to the chase. I have fallen into an eternal slumber, and not a single ounce of divine power can enter your dimension. Now, I am drawing upon the vast power of time within you, pulling out fragments of time from the past. Her words were strange. Xia didn't fully grasp the meaning of projections and fragments of time, but she did understand one thing: you used my power to create this high-dimensional space. There was a hint of displeasure on her face. The goddess noticed her displeasure and chuckled softly. Girl, are you still angry? How amusing. But your powers will dissipate in this time and space. I just intercepted a portion of them. Don't be angry, haha. Xia could understand this. From 2008 to 2166, magic power had skyrocketed, and now it had regressed to 1918. It was like her assets, which had originally been in good credit and were slowly increasing over time, but suddenly something unexpected happened. She received her future salary in advance. It would have been fine to pay it back, but she was unlucky enough to be transported back to the past. Instead of paying back her debt, she overdrew a large amount. Xia couldn't imagine the earth-shattering events that would occur if she left the forbidden magic area. This was why she was so hesitant to leave Paradise Island. Time was too terrifying. Not only her, but even the God King would not easily touch anything related to time. Even someone as smart as Reverse Flash lost his speed force because of his reckless rush from the 25th century to the 21st, forcing him to rebuild his skills all over again. What a tragic experience. This is a lesson for us. Thinking about it, the other party took something that he would have lost anyway, even without asking. But considering that women, even if they evolved into goddesses, are still unreasonable animals, he couldn't spite him, so he could only endure it. Thea drooped her eyelids. Okay, you didn't do anything wrong. So why did you call me here? The goddess suppressed her smile and touched the elk's cheek with a bit of sadness. It is connected to my life and has been with me through countless years, But eventually the time for separation comes. The old gods will eventually fall, and new gods will return to the world. My life is irreversible, but it can be. You can tell that the goddess is truly sad. She also changed her self-proclaimed name from I to I. Thea felt sympathy for the pitiful-looking elk. Is there anything I can do for you? The goddess's facial expression was extremely vague, but Thea still felt a moment of embarrassment from her. I still need to borrow your power to sever the connection between it and me over the long years. It will take a lot of time to draw over my divine power from the past. Damn it, you just bully an honest person to death, right? Thea looked at him suspiciously, waiting for further explanation. Seeing her confusion, the goddess quickly explained, of course, I won't use it for nothing. After severing its connection with me, it will follow you from now on. It has immense combat experience and will be of great help to you. I can also help you retain some of your magic power for about 10 years. Think about it. So, Thea began to think. It wasn't an impossible offer. Thea couldn't tell the deer's combat prowess. It looked like an old deer, after all. It hadn't eaten the human fruit, had it? She honestly didn't see how it would help her, but the 10 years of magic power retention was a significant benefit. It would save 10 years. Compared to wasting 100% of it before, and maybe even making a profit, it seemed like a much better outcome. Your Majesty, my arrival in this dimension was an accident. Will my bloodline cause me to encounter any time constraints once I leave the island? Thea pondered. This was a serious question. She didn't want to be blown trash the moment she left the island, nor did she want to stay there forever. It was a rare opportunity to meet a goddess who seemed so easy to talk to, so she had to ask for clarification. Moreover, if he drained her magic power, time would come knocking on her door, demanding payment. If she couldn't pay it back, it would be a complete joke. The goddess seemed to anticipate her question, proudly replying, divine power can change everything. We respect time, but we're not afraid of it. Leveraging your authority with the Lord of Time, I will help you maintain a constant value. Even if you return to your original time and space, you won't lose control, and your future development won't be affected. This will be your strength from now on, goddess. You know about the Council of the Lords of Time. Thea was a little surprised that Artemis, a true god who had been dead for countless years, could know about those weaklings. I only know they're not as simple as you see them. I don't know much more. It seemed like there were more complexities. Thea couldn't help but feel moved. She let Rip Hunter and the others worry about the council. Your Majesty, what do you need me to do? I will release the magic binding barrier on your body. All you need to do is transfer all your magic power to me as quickly as possible. After confirming that she was ready, the goddess made a distant gesture towards her. Wow, the instantaneous surge of magic caused the entire high-dimensional space to vibrate. Fortunately, this wasn't the first time. Summoning the unicorn, who still didn't understand what was happening, the two merged once more, quickly gathering the surge of magic power. Amazing strength. It's hard to believe you're mortal, eh? You seem to possess a touch of divinity. Though not of the Greek gods, the goddess hadn't anticipated her magic reaching this level. Seeing the space shaken, she stabilized the surroundings and observed her fusion, speaking thoughtfully. Chapter 208 Artemis's strongest attack. She stroked the ears of the elk beside her. She's a good child, destined for great success. I'm sure you won't be wronged by following her, the elk purred at the goddess. Though it had only caught a fleeting glimpse, the unicorn, having been dragged out of its lurch, had indeed seen her. Though it found its distant relative a bit silly and adorable, the elk, a fellow divine beast, shifted its initial friendliness towards Thea to a certain degree of recognition. Thea was unaware that her master and servant were discussing her. She had initially expected the union to be smooth sailing, but a minor hiccup had arisen. The problem lay with the small amount of war divinity Arthas had absorbed. The age of the old gods had ended, and deification was a thing of the past. From then on, it was the age of power. Jin Zhao, ranked third in the universe, defied all other gods. He possessed no divine authority, only unparalleled power. Thea is currently stuck at a point in time where the old gods have died and the new gods have yet to be born. Divinity is a unique quality unique to gods, encompassing their personality, beliefs, and principles of conduct. Originally, Thea could not absorb it, and the gods looked down upon her. However, the unicorn absorbed the small amount, and through fusion, this small amount merged into Thea. Fortunately, She also possessed the Eye of Horus, which shared the same origin as the divinity. This fusion unexpectedly gave her a hint of divinity. What Thea didn't know was that if she absorbed too much divinity, Horus might be resurrected through her body. Fortunately, Horus himself was not the god of war. Most of the divinity representing war within him was taken away by the Dragon Queen. Then, with the unicorn share, the remaining divinity in Thea was minimal. Thinking that she could use this trace of divinity to ignite the divine fire, forge a divine body, attain divine office, and then proudly bear the title of God of War before her name was a pipe dream. But sometimes, this single trace determines the difference between human and God. Given time, Thea could fully absorb this divine energy, however faint, and she would be considered a divine being. After immense effort, she finally managed to temporarily control the divine nature, but a vast amount of time would be needed to fully understand it. She donned her somewhat ostentatious golden armor again, its patterns intricately detailed due to the divine power of war. "Hurry, you're running out of time. Give me your hand," the goddess reminded her, observing her contemplating her armor. Oh, yes, even without the reminder, Thea could feel her magic rapidly dissipating, the speed increasing. Before she could even see the full extent of the change, her armor had degenerated from full armor to half armor in a fraction of a second. Across countless years, the hands of a human and a god finally met. Thea felt as if two massive pumps were operating around her. It wasn't clear which pumped more force, but she felt the energy that once filled every cell of her being rapidly drained. Her gleaming golden armor went from full plate to half plate, then to mail, and finally to leather. The only thing that remained unchanged was her cloak, but what good was that? "Give me back my armor." Thea felt like someone who had painstakingly cultivated the land, only to have the Japanese plunder it just as they were about to harvest. The heartache was unbearable. Fortunately, the gods, save for the god of lies, were trustworthy, or perhaps simply disdained to deceive mortals. The goddess didn't blindly drain her magic power, but gradually helped her stabilize some of it. She didn't understand the technique, but she felt an indescribable charm. "Alright," the goddess abruptly pushed Thea aside and stood aside. Even for a deity like her, transforming vast amounts of magic power into divine strength wasn't easy. Xia felt like crying, but she couldn't. Although she'd been prepared, the feeling of being suddenly thrown back to a pre-liberation era was beyond words without first-hand experience. The elk, seemingly experienced in comforting others, strolled over to her and nudged her hand with the side of his cheek. "Even you're comforting me? Hey, I'm still strong. Oh, don't argue with me. Okay, I'm just a little sad about my unparalleled magical powers," Xia was about to boast, but the elk, having lived for countless years, had seen through her facade and exposed her hypocrisy. After a few playful exchanges between the two, Xia finally began to focus on her own current situation. The goddess hadn't lied. While her original magical power was powerful, it was also vague and unreal. Xia felt that the magic within her was now a part of her, just like her hands and feet. Her weakness in control had been greatly alleviated. She believed that with a few days of stability, this part of her magic would completely merge with her. After examining herself, she turned her attention back to the goddess. The shadowy goddess fingers traced countless strange paths, and within the confined space, numerous shadows gradually materialized: a young dancer, an elderly huntress, a female lord atop a chariot, and countless other forms. Whoosh! It was clear that this summoning across time and space was a tremendous burden for her. She wasted no time. As if receiving a signal from some unknown source, all the shadows quickly descended upon her, eventually merging into a faceless huntress in a green robe, carrying a silver longbow slung across her shoulders. Thea distanced herself from the elk, knowing with a flick of her toes that the next step was to tamper with the elk's timeline. She was now utterly terrified of time. The goddess's methods were not unusual. She used divine power to summon her own selves from various time periods, channeling a portion of their power through Thea's temporal energy, merging them into the present form. Though Thea was a bit stronger now than a weakling, her former strength remained intact, having fought battles from afar. Her intuition told her that the current goddess was stronger than Horus's original rival, though how much stronger was difficult to determine. But Thea rubbed her chin. "I have no problem with you carrying a bow and arrow, but why the green robe?" The image reminded Thea of Oliver on Inferno Island. Could it be that Green Arrow is invincible? Is he your true believer? Suddenly, Thea saw the goddess draw her bow and arrow at the elk. A massive vortex appeared behind her. This time, the space shook even more violently than when Thea exploded. Some parts of the ground were already cracking, and the entire space was violently distorted. Oh my god. What did I see? Thea knew she had been wrong before, that she had underestimated the difficulty of severing the timeline. This goddess's shadow was just a trigger, drawing her true self here. As the vortex expanded, Thea took a few more steps outward. She could no longer help but sense the massive energy fluctuations on the other side. This was probably Artemis's true form, the most powerful strike across time and space in her prime. Chapter 209, The Chosen Ones of Artemis. The elk dropped to the ground, trembling. It certainly didn't think the goddess was going to kill it, but rather felt sorry for its master's lavish divine energy, sobbing softly as it lay there. Here it comes. The shadowy goddess's aura reached its peak, releasing her tightly clenched arrow. The crisp sound of a bowstring echoed from the vortex behind her. Faster than lightning, faster than light, even faster than the very concept of speed, a sharp arrow darted from the vortex, instantly piercing the elk directly in front. The shadowy goddess's arrow landed behind it. Two deep chimes echoed in Thea's heart. This wasn't sound transmission, it was a resonance of some kind. The elk's past and future were severed. From the vortex, a shadowy figure, identical to the elk on the ground, sprinted out, the two merging into one, indistinguishable. The shadowy goddess closed the vortex, and her green-robed bow and arrow vanished once more, as if they had never existed. Gently stroking the elk's cheek, "Child, you are free. Go and live a new life." The elk walked over to Xia, looking back every few steps. The goddess tapped each of them on the forehead and said, "It will accompany you until the end of your life. It will accompany you back to your original time and space. You must treat it well." Xia, who was originally preparing to ask how to get home, quickly seized the opportunity and said, "Your Majesty, can you let me return to my original time and space? Or let me contact the time ship I was on before?" The goddess was silent for a while, as if searching for something. Finally, she shook her head at Xia's expectant gaze and said, "I'm sorry, I can't find any trace of them. Although my divine power is not enough to search too far into the future, I feel that they are not on the same timeline as you." Before Xia could show a look of despair, he continued, "However, you can go and get my bow and arrow when you get out. There is a divine arrow blessed by the Father God's divine power in the quiver that the Father God made for me. When this arrow absorbs enough divine power, it can help you open the time channel. With your authority in the Time Council, you should be able to find your original time point smoothly." "What do you mean, his bow and arrow? It shouldn't be borrowed, right?" Xia asked cautiously and a little uncertainly. "Your bow and arrow, haha, little girl, don't test me. It's just as you think. I've fallen and no longer need a bow and arrow. Your hunting and philosophy are in line with my teachings, but next time when you eat wild boar, don't mention me." The goddess's face couldn't be seen clearly, but her tone had been much more relaxed since she saved the elk. Xia covered her mouth. Could it be that he heard her nonsense while eating wild boar? These gods are too idle. You are lying dead, and you still have the leisure time. After a few embarrassed smiles, Xia quickly apologized to the goddess. What childish words, what naivety, no matter whether it is right or not, at least express your attitude. The goddess nodded, as if accepting her explanation, and her tone turned serious. "Where does the divinity in you come from? If I'm not mistaken, this is an Egyptian deity? Judging from the divinity, there is a sense of unwillingness. Could it be that a mortal like you can kill a god?" Thea was a little unsure of how to answer, but then she remembered the books she had read from Diana in the past few days. It seemed that the Greek and Egyptian pantheons were sworn enemies. Seeing that the goddess was still waiting for her answer, she steeled her resolve and nodded. "It's Horus." The goddess was silent for a few seconds, and her tone suddenly became high-pitched. "Amazing. It's hard to believe that you can accomplish such a feat as a mortal. I have to reward you, haha." Thea laughed wildly in her heart. She had made the right bet. They did have a grudge. This was like a token of her loyalty. "We are definitely one of the same." She seemed to see all kinds of divine equipment falling into her bag. One of each of the 18 weapons. Darkseid might still be outmatched, but General Zod shouldn't be a problem. So cool. Just as Thea was wondering if she was dreaming and would be laughed out loud, the goddess sighed, her heart skipping a beat. "Unfortunately, I'm alone now and have nothing to reward you with, but I still have some magic power I absorbed from you." What did she mean? You're using my own things to get rid of me now that my divine equipment is gone? Thea couldn't quite put her finger on the matter. She simply felt the majesty of your divine presence. It was too stingy, but something was better than nothing. Just as she was about to nod, the goddess spoke again. I've converted all this magic power into divine power. Even if I give it back to you, you can't use it. What should I do? Thea's mood was swirling, fluctuating. She could finally tell that the goddess wasn't trying to tease her, but was simply too strapped for cash. Seeing the goddess deep in thought, she didn't dare to urge her, but could only stand still and wait. Young time traveler, will you be my chosen one? The goddess finally asked. Chosen one? Thea's first thought was of Moira deceiving the common people, those were her chosen ones. But she quickly realized that wasn't what the goddess meant. Thanks to Diana, Thea had recently read a lot of spiritual books and attended 2 consecutive nights of literacy classes, so her knowledge of the divine was not shallow. She immediately understood the goddess's meaning. What responsibilities do your chosen ones bear? The reward is proportional to the effort. There are pie-in-the-sky opportunities, but theoretically, they wouldn't be hers. The goddess waved her hand. I've fallen. My chosen ones don't have any responsibilities. If you're feeling up to it, help spread the word. If you're feeling down, you don't have to. Such a generous offer. Thea was immediately tempted. According to Diana, chosen ones were different from priests. Priests were servants of the gods, even the most powerful. Chosen ones served as disciples and assistants. Seeing her intrigued, the goddess added another factor. I originally thought you were of the light attribute, so you absorbed more magic. I didn't expect you also possess a significant amount of dark element. If you become my chosen one, you'll master countless moonlight spells, and the power will be increased by 30%. I am willing to be your chosen one. Thea immediately knelt on one knee. Having magic without corresponding spells was too embarrassing. Since there were no responsibilities or obligations, why not get a lot of knowledge for free? Ahem. Stand up first, the goddess, slightly embarrassed, pulled Thea up again. Facing her puzzled gaze, she asked seriously, Time traveler, tell me your name. Thea's mouth twitched. Are you kidding me? We've been chatting for ages. And you don't even know my name. This goddess looks serious, but she's actually a bit of a clown. Then again, you can't blame her. Horace, whom she stabbed to death, probably didn't even know his own name until his death. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210 Silver Moon Longbow and God King Quiver. These gods, whether Greek or Egyptian, all have this problem, they look down on mortals. Perhaps it's because their lives are so high that they're too lazy to remember humans' fleeting lifespans of a few hundred years. There's an idiom that perfectly captures their attitude, arrogant. Thea stood up helplessly and cleared her throat. Your Majesty, my name is Thea Quinn, ahem, I remember. Come, kneel now. Thea forced herself to kneel once more. Thankfully, there were no unexpected incidents. The goddess conjured a longbow and placed it on her shoulder. Breathing steadily and solemnly, she said, I am Artemis, daughter of Zeus and Lero, goddess of the hunt and moonlight. I bless Thea Quinn to be my chosen one, forever. Thea had originally expected a Western wedding, where she'd have to say something like I do, but the reality was that this ceremony didn't require her consent. The gods had their way. If they said yes, it was okay, and if they said no, it was okay too. The goddess then repeated it twice more in 2 strange languages, and Thea didn't understand a word. A soft, silvery light instantly connected the foreheads of a man and a god, flooding her mind with countless pieces of knowledge. There were dark spells, the rituals of the Greek gods, information on hunting and raising animals, even numerous dance moves, and a wealth of knowledge about winemaking. What a mess. Thea was speechless. These gods looked so sacred, but in reality, they were also idle. Just look at the knowledge the goddess had passed on to her, and nearly 70% of it was about eating, drinking, and having fun. No one usually focused on fighting, and time was wasted. No wonder Ares single-handedly defeated an entire ship of them. But to say this chosen one was useless was truly unfair to the goddess. While the specifics still needed to be sorted out, she had already mastered a spell-like ability. The goddess called this spell Eternal Night. Casting it every 3 days, it transforms the surrounding environment into a moonlit night, covering a 10-mile radius. Within this radius, regardless of friend or foe, the attack and mana of women automatically increases by 30%, while that of men decreases by 30%. This highly discriminatory spell also depends on the specific target's strength. If the opponent is too strong, the 30% reduction might not be enough, but a reduction is certain. As for the other benefits granted to the chosen ones, such as increased lifespan and immunity to hallucinations, Thea didn't bother to examine them closely. The goddess's shadow grew even more ethereal, clearly depleting the magic power she had absorbed from Thea. I have completely transformed the divinity you received from Horus into divine power. Divine power is the foundation of your future. I will teach you a method. If you regain divinity in the future, you can use this spell to fully transform it into your own divine power. The goddess spoke, and then sent another ball of light into Thea's body. Farewell, my chosen one. I am truly fortunate to meet you in my final moments. May you forge a new path under the starlight. Go forth, your future awaits you. If Diana encounters difficulties, please help her for my sake. The goddess's hand rapidly enlarged in her vision. Thea felt as if she were being pushed from a towering building. As her consciousness returned to her body, she found herself still in the cave. There was no high-dimensional space, no goddess. Only the mournful cry of an elk. Had she escaped? Feeling less than a tenth of her original magical power, she sighed inwardly. She could fully control it, releasing her fusion with the unicorn. She lowered her head and hugged the elk. Come on, let's get out. This time, the elk didn't hesitate, bowing its head and following Thea out of the cave with determined steps. As they exited the cave, Diana's concerned gaze met her. Before she could ask how long it had been, 2 meteors, one silver-white and the other deep blue, streaked across the sky, leaving long streaks as they hurtled towards Thea. What were they? Thea's powerful dynamic vision didn't allow her to discern them clearly before she realized she had 2 more objects in her hands. Artemis's silver moon longbow. And what's the other one? Oh my god, it's a quiver made by the father, only Diana could exclaim in such amazement. At the moment, she only had a single protective silver bracelet, not yet the divine armor she would wear in the future. But now, seeing Thea acquire 2 divine armor pieces, she was filled with envy. Thea gently stroked the bow, revealing it wasn't made of metal, but rather a blend of oak and star fragments, embodying both strength and resilience. The bow, a full 5 feet long, was a traditional ancient design. The guard featured Artemis's favorite symbol, a pair of antlers. The wings were intricately carved with intricate carvings, all celebrating the goddess's achievements. Thea slowly drew the string, and a magical arrow instantly appeared on it. After the standard movement, she learned the bow's full name, Falling Stars. Artemis Silver Moon Longbow. With its own magical arrow. Amazing. Thea then examined the quiver. If the bow had been completely welcoming, the quiver itself had taken on a more reserved air. Was this deep blue quiver crafted for the goddess by old Zeus? This quiver fully embodies the God King's style, flamboyance and unbridled impunity. Ever since it was acquired, it has been glowing a deep blue, almost as if to signal its extraordinary power. It contains only 2 arrows, or rather, 2 types of arrows. Each time one is used, a new one automatically appears in the quiver. One is the homeward arrow the goddess and Thea had mentioned. Its tip is a deep blue lightning bolt. When imbued with divine power, it can open a time portal. Of course, it can also function as a lightning bolt. The goddess's own words were, "The Father's power is unfathomable, and he has no idea of all the uses of this arrow." The other is a sharp arrow blessed by the goddess herself, a deep red hue. She calls it the Arrow of Vengeance. However, Thea believes it's designed specifically to target women. Theoretically, any woman who has lost her virginity could be killed with a single blow. Perhaps due to the growing number of opposing gods, the goddess rewrote her teachings, replacing the target group with women who have committed evil and lost their virginity. Honestly, Thea herself sweats at the sight of this arrow, wondering if there are any female villains in this world. A sure kill attack sounds impressive, but it comes with a lot of limitations. She'd better not use this arrow in the future if she can. Both a bow and arrow are stored within her body, and they possess unique properties. This means that if she takes these 2 artifacts, even on Paradise Island in her original time and space, they will disappear. Unless she's killed. These 2 pieces of equipment will be bound to her. She didn't put them away immediately. She still wanted to see the faces of the evil priests. What if they refused to acknowledge her? Chapter 211 Joining the Gang. Sia approached the three priests with a smile. It wasn't long, was it? If you don't mind, then yes. Before she could finish, the dark-clad woman slumped to her knees before her, her dagger cradled in her hands. She wept bitterly. You are Artemis' sole representative on Earth. I am willing to return the divine name and become your eternal servant, continuing to serve the goddess of the hunt. Please accept me. Sia quickly glanced at the others, noting their expressions of surprise. This showed that this move wasn't directed by anyone but entirely her own. It had to be said that she had some quick wit. She decisively renounced her divine name and became a servant. At least her reputation was preserved. If Sia hadn't left the island, no one could expel her. However, her promise of eternal servanthood was a heavy one. She probably thought Sia wouldn't live long. What a shame. Now, with the chosen one and divine power, and the life she originally shared with a unicorn, Sia could easily live for tens of thousands of years. The dark, strong woman's plan was quite thorough. It seemed she wasn't a completely mindless warrior. She wondered if she would be able to take this guy down. Hippolyta glanced at her from the corner of her eye, only to see the queen nod slightly. Thea certainly wouldn't be so obedient, but she was already in a state of uncertainty, and the queen's gesture solidified her resolve. What's your real name? The strong black woman said Niobe with a bit of pain. Xia took her dagger and handed it back to her. I am Thea Quinn. I am the chosen one of Artemis. As the only earthly representative of the authority of my god, I accept your allegiance until the end of my life. I allow you to continue to serve the goddess. After she finished speaking, she gently brushed Niobe's shoulder with the silver moon longbow in her hand. Get up, warrior of the goddess. Now I give you a task. In the black strong woman's inexplicable eyes, Xia pointed at the elk and said, the task of feeding it will be handed over to you from now on. Sending the black strong woman to feed the deer was an important reason why Xia finally made the decision. As a rich lady, she didn't have the patience to serve animals. Since you, the black strong woman, knew the elk before, the task of feeding it will be handed over to you from now on. All this happened very quickly. The black strong woman voluntarily gave up the name of the god, and the competition was meaningless. Only then did a huge discussion sound in the crowd. The chosen one, this is an honor bestowed only upon heroes of antiquity, the soul walker of the gods, the voice of the gods. For heaven's sake, the three veteran priests were completely utterly dejected. Their most important fighting force, the strong black woman, had defected to the enemy, and the remaining female warriors regarded them with a touch of distrust. While the chosen one was appointed by a single deity, her status as a virtual representative of the gods gave her immense influence. For years, the three of them had been speaking for the 12 principal gods. Now Artemis and the others were undoubtedly no longer able to represent them, but that didn't mean they could claim that future oracles were issued by all 11 of them. The unwavering integrity of their unity had been an ironclad rule for nearly 5,000 years, and now that this ironclad rule had been punctured, the three felt as if everything they had just seen was a dream. Thea didn't bother to pay attention to their thoughts. She just wanted to hurry back and carefully study the specific abilities of the chosen one and the bow. But then Hippolyta grabbed her, raised her arm, and, facing her bewildered gaze, announced, from now on, she is our Artemis, our sister. Oh, Artemis! The crowd erupted in cheers, Diana's voice the loudest. Oh, am I in? Thea took in the excited expressions. This wasn't just a matter of opening a reputation. After earning the name of God, she was already an Amazon. Legally, ethically, and in every way, she was part of the team. She still had a few months to stay, so this wasn't bad. Thea accepted the praise calmly, even the veteran priests, who offered a few forced congratulations. Ignoring the priest's grim expression, Hippolyta said, Diana, take Artemis and change your clothes. The rest of you, come with me. Let's prepare for the ceremony to welcome the new sisters. Thea, oh, no, Artemis, let's go. The ceremony will be quick. Diana grabbed Thea and ran. The elk saw them and hurried after them. The dark, sturdy woman sighed and followed closely behind. Diana, please call me Thea, she said before she was interrupted. No. You must be respectful to the gods, and so on and so forth. Thea was speechless. Her reverence for the gods was completely unnecessary. In her opinion, the goddess was only slightly better than a clown. And despite your admiration for her, she didn't care about you at all. Although you were half-sisters, The goddess's mention of Diana at the end showed that even 10,000 Dianas put together wouldn't be as important as her dear. The so-called blessing of the gods was likely forced upon them by Zeus, out of his deep love for his daughter. Thea felt pressed for time and a heavy workload. She needed to promptly correct her principles and cultivate a healthy outlook on life, lest she be utterly defeated by her half-brother. The three of them, along with the deer, left the tower and began to pick up speed. Thea now possessed the blessing of one god, though not as much as Diana's 6. However, her magical restraints had been lifted, and she still possessed over a decade of magical energy, along with a trace of divine power transformed from her own divinity. Her strength now surpassed Diana, whose divine power had been suppressed by 90%. Elks are naturally adept runners, and the dark, powerful woman, sprinting around the island daily, was no slouch either. In less than a quarter of an hour, they returned to their quarters. Diana presented Thea with a set of Amazon armor. It was obvious that uniformity was essential for organizational coordination. If Thea wanted to join, she had no choice but to change into it. "Can't I wear underwear?" Thea asked Diana, somewhat embarrassed, upon learning she would have to wear the half-body armor without any underwear. Diana hesitated, letting her try it on. She quickly noticed a problem and shook her head repeatedly. No, that black strap on your back is too noticeable. You better fix that." Luckily, shorts existed in ancient Greece, so she wouldn't have to parade around in a kilt without anything. Even though there weren't any males on this island, the thought of how refreshing it would be was intoxicating. Thea was a bit thin for her age, but thankfully tall enough. While she couldn't compare to Diana, who stood 5 feet 8 inches, her height was still average for the island. She changed into the standard Paradise Island attire and checked in the bronze mirror for any flaws. She was satisfied. Adding a cape and a spear, she shouted Sparta and could go to the next set for a minor role. She magically enveloped the components of the robotic arm and stored them in her bloodline. Their rituals valued personal simplicity. Too much accessories would make her look unconventional. Chapter 212 Paradise Island Initiation Ceremony. After changing her clothes, Thea followed Diana on a sprint. "Why are we here? Isn't this a temple?" Thea asked, somewhat puzzled, as they reached a vast cavern. This place was very close to where the two women had been frankly researching a few days earlier. "Our sisters all originally came from here," Diana said without further explanation, leading the way inside. Thea secretly observed the nearby rocks and landforms. This meant that the soil that formed the Amazon came from this cave? Should she take some soil back for testing before leaving? Following Diana through winding paths, they entered the depths of the cavern. Wow, this place is huge. The cavern was as wide as a large square, reaching a height of 20 meters. The female warriors were already in position, half kneeling and bowing their heads, reciting ancient poems. Hippolyta's eyes widened slightly when she saw them approaching, and she gestured for Thea to enter the pool in front of her. Thea had just taken 2 steps when Diana grabbed her. "Why are you pulling me?" Diana first nodded with her mouth, then seeing that she didn't understand, she could only whisper, "Clothes, take a bath." Although Thea didn't have the wisdom of Athena, she was also an exceptionally smart person among mortals. Hearing her words, she asked in surprise, "Now? There's no changing room? I can just walk in after taking off my clothes." Diana nodded vigorously, indicating that there was no room for negotiation. "My God, you guys really deserve to be influenced by ancient Greece. The atmosphere is very open." But the arrow was on the string and she couldn't hesitate. She stomped her feet with a hard heart. She was going to die. After all, they were all women, so it wasn't a disadvantage. Thea tremblingly handed all the clothes to her new servant Niobe for safekeeping. The strong black woman had been expelled from the Amazon and could not participate in such a ceremony. Now she was just watching the ceremony as Thea's servant. "Shoes," Diana warned her as she began to move forward. Thea removed her shoes again. Though the cave wasn't cold, she still felt a chill. The distance, less than 30 meters, which used to take her a second, now felt like 30 minutes. She could often feel eyes on her back, thighs, and many other unspeakable parts of her body. Walking barefoot on the gravel, with her divinely transformed body now impervious to even the rubble, let alone a mountain of knives, she felt a stinging pain beneath her feet. Her nerves were tense, and she relied on her immense self-control to maintain a steady pace. Fortunately, no matter how long the road was, it had an end. After 30 meters, Thea, at Hippolyta's signal, entered the pool and let out a sigh of relief until the water reached her neck. Bathing was only part of the ritual. She certainly couldn't spend half an hour doing it, with 1,500 people watching below, their eyes wide open. After a quick rinse, Thea was pulled out again. She quickly put on her clothes and joined the others in a half-hearted prayer praising Zeus. Since his quiver was still in good condition, Thea hummed a few words along for the ride. Hippolyta led the way in welcoming the new sisters, and 1,550 people came forward to offer their blessings. The frantic chatter continued for another hour. Thea, wet from being pulled out, now had her hair dry. As the crowd gradually dispersed, she breathed a sigh of relief. It was finally over. Diana, take Artemis to the temple and leave a statue. The queen's command made Thea's heart skip a beat. And what else? Once they reached the temple and explained their purpose to several female warriors, Thea realized that this so-called image was actually a statue, meant to stand beside the deity. If this were still the age of deification, perhaps Thea could have achieved godhood by living like a statue for millions of years. Thinking that the elder spirit had been kind to her, gifting her pets and equipment, and that having a statue beside her wouldn't be embarrassing, Thea readily agreed. Who knew this would be the beginning of a nightmare for the day? What? Just a pose? Why take off your shirt? Thea felt it was too much trouble to communicate with these old-fashioned people. The warrior woman, skilled enough to be considered a sculptor in modern society, gave a wry smile. She had already been speaking to the newly elected goddess of hunting for half an hour. She discussed art, folklore, and doctrine, then led the woman into the statue room for a tour. True to her words, all the statues were in various combat poses, devoid of any extraneous clothing, save for a single cloth belt wrapped around their lower parts for clothing. Seeing Thea hesitate, she launched into eloquent exposition, pontificating on beauty, honor, and the power of faith, pontificating on the benefits of this. Thea didn't hear the rest of the sculptor's words, but she certainly grasped the power of faith. While this wasn't the age of deification, that didn't mean faith didn't provide strength. It might not be immediately apparent, but Thea wasn't from that era. It would be a century before she returned to her original time and space, and the faith she'd accumulated over that century would be enough for her to transform a significant amount of divine power. Can we sculpt inside the temple? No way. The stone debris would defile the temple's sacredness. No, we have to sculpt outside in the square. It's well ventilated and sunny, a prime location for artistic expression, the sculptor insisted, insisting they work outdoors. Thea weighed the pros and cons for a moment. For that little bit of faith, she'd risk it all. She couldn't help but glance up at the sky. The gods have fallen, and Batman's watchtower won't be launched for another 100 years. There shouldn't be anyone watching from above. For the second time that day, she took off her armor, wrapped a piece of linen around her waist, and positioned herself in the sunniest spot. She encountered another awkward moment carrying her quiver. It was worn diagonally, and the strap passed right between the unspeakable parts of Thea's chest, making it a bit choking. Why is this thing so tight? She adjusted it a few times, finding a barely acceptable position. She raised her longbow, her chest pounding, yet she feigned composure and fearlessness. Hold this position. I'll be right. The sculptor corrected her movements a few more times, then, with a shout, began to work with her hammer and axe. Thea had held this position for 3 hours with no sign of improvement. She considered casting a haste spell on the creature, but the island's magic barrier blocked it as soon as it was cast. Sigh, Thea sighed. It seemed only her own magic barrier had been lifted. From now on, she could only use spells on herself while on the island. As the sun set, most of the female warriors, returning from their day of training, passed by the square and saluted Thea as she posed. Being surrounded by a bunch of people and having to pretend to be serious is really a test of acting skills. Xia can only focus all her attention on thinking about new skills to ease this inexplicable embarrassment. Chapter 213. The curtain is about to open. The first thing she studied was the Silver Moon longbow, her bread and butter for the long term. By this point, Thea had a basic understanding of the world's energy composition. The 6 elements, earth, fire, water, wind, light, and darkness, were the conclusions drawn by mages after observing the world. But in the eyes of the gods, all this was merely a variation of divine power. Divine power, though attributeless, surpassed the 6 elemental magic powers and was the ultimate power in the world. Artemis' Silver Moon longbow was best powered by divine power, but due to the bow's inherent compatibility, It could also be powered by lower-level magic. Thea could attach various directional spells to her arrows, creating specialized arrows. This not only increased range but also increased casting speed and reduced mana consumption. If her magical proficiency deepened, combining 2 or even 3 spells onto her arrows would yield even more impressive results. Fire and wind magic were too limited, and a simple flaming arrow might have been powerful in ancient times, but it was a bit underwhelming in today's technologically advanced world. Thea focused her research on the 2 attributes of light and darkness. Light-attributed arrows, combined with her Eye of Horus, could be launched far and wide, perhaps as far as 800 miles. However, the arrows continuously absorbed energy from the natural environment during flight, maintaining a near-constant energy consumption. Theoretically, the arrows could travel as far as light could travel. This result made Thea sweat. Did this mean that as long as she could see, she could shoot? The problem then arose: divine power limited the Eye of Horus's capabilities, she couldn't see that far. Another problem was that even if the arrows could travel several light years, their inherent power was insufficient. Killing Darkseid on Apocalypse with 1 arrow was a pipe dream, but it could still bully Earthlings. Thanks to the indoctrination of the Chosen, Thea now possessed the most extensive knowledge of dark elemental spells. Many of the goddesses' understandings were far too profound. Setting aside their respective combat prowess, Merlyn was a mere child compared to the goddess. Much of her knowledge wasn't suitable for a beginner like Thea, so she could only draw on a few similar spells to compare with her own Black Mist and Black Mist immobilization spells. One spell caught her eye. The goddess named it Shadow Labyrinth. It was so high level that even with all of Thea's current mana, she couldn't cast it. However, with the remaining divine power in the bow, she could barely cast it. The target affected by the spell is instantly drawn into a maze of dark elements, regardless of their will. The target possesses a profound innate wisdom and exceptional intelligence, allowing them to clearly see their surroundings and have a small chance of escaping the maze and returning to the normal world. If they can't, the entire maze will be sucked into Artemis's kingdom. The goddess is bored, and she'd be delighted to have someone to keep her company. There's also black oil, which creates a layer of oily mud on the ground. This, Thea thought, was an escape technique. There were hundreds of spells, each profound and extensive, requiring considerable time to fully comprehend. After 6 hours of standing in the sun without a drop of water, Thea finally received the sculptor's blessing. The preliminary work was complete, and she could handle the rest herself. She no longer needed to endure this ordeal. She felt completely relieved to learn that the statue, once completed, would remain private. She didn't want Steve Trevor to return to the island 6 months later and see such a shameful statue of her. She feared she would gouge out his eyes, and for the sake of everyone's future, it was best to place the statue within the temple for worship. Pulling Diana, who had been accompanying her, they toured the temple without finding the 3 evil priests. She'd intended to confront them, but their hidden Eye of Horus was undetectable. So, Thea abandoned her veneration and sought a place to spar with Diana. The days that followed were incredibly smooth. Despite her inner disdain, the goddess possessed considerable culinary expertise. To prevent her hunter followers from starving in the jungle, she painstakingly researched numerous recipes and compiled a simple, easy-to-follow wilderness survival guide. With this guide, Thea finally escaped the miserable situation of sharing porridge with the female warriors. The dark, strong woman, who had been forced to submit to her, began to eat at her table daily, significantly improving their relationship and boosting their loyalty. As for Diana, the once well-behaved girl, she had completely removed her from the group. The 3 of them, along with a deer, would often retreat to a separate area to feast. The deer, which ate everything except its own kind, was relatively easy to feed. The 3 of them naturally spent their free time competing in martial arts competitions, as there were few other leisure activities on the island. Thea could leave the island now, but she couldn't figure out where to obtain divine power. She had once stabbed herself with arrows during a duel with Diana, attempting to absorb some of the lost divine power, but the results were disappointing. Perhaps due to the forbidden magic zone, the amount of power she absorbed was minimal. While other Gout's power could be used to recharge, and theoretically Vandal Savage could be there at this point, Thea couldn't find him. Even if she did, he certainly wouldn't summon Horus unless he was cornered. Thea didn't want to repeatedly trick Horus, he was such a servile god. As for whether other priests could summon a god, Thea felt that without near-infinite vitality, 100 or 80 mortal priests wouldn't be able to summon one without a massive blood sacrifice. After much deliberation, she decided to follow Diana to fight Ares. Their battle should yield enough energy for her to return home. The battle for Artemis's title had concluded, and peace gradually returned to Theope Island. Thea spent 3 months absorbing a drop of Horus divine blood. Initially, she had obtained 4 drops of ordinary divine blood and 2 drops of extremely refined divine blood. The atom consumed 1 ordinary drop, leaving Thea with 2 drops to take back for her parents. This time, she absorbed the remaining ordinary drop. Her foundation was completely different from that of ordinary people like the atom. Furthermore, she employed the secret techniques taught by the goddess, transforming the divine blood into divinity, and then transforming divinity into divine power. The initial absorption process took her 3 days without food, water, or movement. The remaining energy was continuously extracted and digested, a process that lasted over 3 months before completion. The divine power within her body grew from a hair's worth to the thickness of a toothpick, and Thea's strength, speed, and endurance were comprehensively enhanced. One day, while Nabi was taking the elk for a walk, Thea and Diana sparred at the beach. Diana, perhaps realizing her own strength, saw her power skyrocket. Initially losing more than she won, they were now extremely close in strength, a battle they had engaged in numerous times over the past 6 months. Huh? What's that? The 2 people who were sparring suddenly heard a roar coming from the sky. They both stopped and looked back. It's a plane. Chapter 214 Steve Trevor. Is this a plane? Why does it look like there's someone on it? It seems like they're calling for help. Diana didn't have the special vision Thea possessed. Her divine power had transformed her in all aspects, giving her a well-balanced overall quality. She had no strengths, but no weaknesses either. Squinting slightly, she surveyed the smoke-belching Fokker monoplane in the sky. Diana asked Thea, with some uncertainty, to her exceptionally sharp eyes. If she could see it, Thea could see even more clearly. It was indeed a young Steve Trevor, the future liaison between the Justice League and the U.S. government, and leader of the AION, dressed in a German military uniform. He watched anxiously as the plane spun toward the sea. He lacked Thea's skills, and he couldn't pull out a life-saving device like a skateboard. Despite struggling to regain control, all attempts ultimately failed, and with a thud, he plunged into the freezing water. Diana, taking in the scene, hesitated for a moment, ready to jump in to save the man. But after taking 2 steps, she felt her braid grabbed, and she could only stare at Thea in confusion. Paradise Island should not be discovered by the world. Consider Her Majesty's instructions. Of course, Thea couldn't let her rescue anyone. Steve Trevor, on the verge of meeting God, unexpectedly rescued by a beautiful woman, fell into a fruitless love affair. This is how the psychological concept of the drawbridge effect arises. However, outright rejection would somewhat undermine one's own image, so it was only fitting to place the blame on Diana's beloved mother. As expected, Diana's thoughts were distracted by her words. She pondered Hippolyta's attitude, feeling a pang of bitterness. Her Majesty wouldn't even frown at the thought of 10 million people dying before her eyes, let alone one. This outcome left Diana in a quandary. Just as Diana's mind was racing, Thea finally spoke. Forget it, let's get him out first. It's a life after all. Thea's face brimmed with positivity as she spoke, causing Diana to pause, thinking to herself, what a nice person. Thea couldn't bear to watch Steve drown. This guy was even more important to the timeline than she was. If he died, who knows what the US would be like in 2008. Without him to suppress her, the ambitious Amanda might have pulled off some earth-shattering patriotic act. While the person who had to be saved, Thea wouldn't jump into the sea and swim across. Perhaps it was a conflict of character, but Thea hated water. She could tolerate and enjoy bathing, but she had a deep aversion to the idea of swimming in the ocean. She estimated the distance, it was okay. The plane crash site was outside the forbidden magic zone, so Thea's spells were still working normally. With a soft utterance and a chant, a large, silvery hand appeared before Steve Trevor. As he stared in shock, it roughly grasped him by the collar and forcibly yanked him from the cockpit, slowly flying him toward the shore. Diana had witnessed Thea's magic many times over the past 6 months, initially surprised, then envious, and now accustomed to it. Seeing the rescue, Diana's own interest surged. Hey, can you pull that plane back? I'm curious. Huh? A plane. Thea observed the old Fokker monoplane shattered into 3 pieces. This wasn't part of the original storyline. While this request might have been difficult for others, it was a breeze for her. She drew her silver moon longbow, focused a magical arrow, and estimated the distance. It was only 3,000 meters. Arrows, attached to magical ropes, pierced the fuselage. In the hands of two unbelievably strong men, the fuselage's meager self-importance seemed non-existent, and the broken fuselage was quickly pulled back into place by their immense strength. As the magical hand carried Steve Trevor to the shore, Diana hesitated. "Is that a man over there?" Thea, too lazy to answer such a childish question, turned away and ignored her. Diana folded her elbows, lost in thought. Should she study the man first or the plane? Ultimately, humanitarianism prevailed. Those machines wouldn't escape anyway. Excited, Diana pulled Thea to see the man, the first living man she had ever seen. Thea knew a major battle was imminent, with the Germans and Hippolyta poised to make their appearances. The Germans didn't matter, but she didn't want Queen Hippolyta to mistakenly believe she had saved Steve and, to expel her from Paradise Island to appease the islanders, leave her daughter behind. According to Thea's speculation, the sinister Hippolyta was perfectly capable of doing this. That would be too unfair. She couldn't possibly go fight Ares herself, could she? Diana had to leave the island. This was an incredibly important event in the timeline. Thea unconsciously slowed down a few steps, instantly casting a suggestion spell to somewhat minimize her presence. "Are you a man?" Diana flashed what she considered to be a very affable smile, looking down at the distraught Steve. But Steve, frightened by the silvery hand, had practically peed his pants. This was the first time he'd encountered such a supernatural thing. Before he could recover, Diana's shout brought him back to reality. "A man, what the hell?" Steve Trevor looked at Diana's radiant smile, feeling no surprise. His usual personality was always to offer a few sarcastic remarks about a beautiful woman, no matter how critical the situation. But at this moment, those thoughts were completely absent. All that crossed his mind were thoughts like, "Her teeth are so white, and will she eat me?" This naturally also benefited from Miss Thea's contribution. Although the island's magic barrier remained, the two of them were at the very edge of the island. The barrier's current position made it extremely unstable, which was one of the reasons they were able to break in one after another. Thea cast a very small fear spell on Steve. This spell, greatly weakened by the magic barrier, would normally only cause nightmares, but now, on the still shaken Steve, it was surprisingly effective. Unfortunately, the show didn't last more than 2 minutes. Boom, a muffled sound echoed in Thea's heart. She immediately turned to look at Diana, but found that she was completely unaware of the loud noise. What was going on? Was it magic? Thea immediately opened the Eye of Horus and observed. She saw that the magic barrier that had previously protected Paradise Island like a huge shield had been torn open, a hole several meters high, not far from them. The barrier had been pierced by a powerful force. Could their successive intrusions not be accidental, but rather the intervention of a higher being? Ares, Thea chanted the name in her mind. She had been wondering how this area had existed undiscovered for 5,000 years, and how it had happened that these people had broken in. Thinking back on it now, Thea's passage through the time tunnel into Paradise Island wasn't an accident, it was likely the result of a few gods' covert manipulation. Could these guys be an accident? Perhaps this was part of Ares's plan, or perhaps not, but there was no time to ponder. The enemy was already here. Chapter 215, Battle. 4 small boats and a warship approached from the nearby sea. Just as Thea was debating whether to sink the warship first, she saw the warship, barely a light cruiser, run aground right before her eyes. It had hid a reef. The hull tilted violently, and soldiers swam aboard. In less than 3 seconds, the ship began taking on water, and in less than 10, it sank to the bottom. Was this a mistake? She didn't believe there wasn't divine intervention, it was too suspicious. There were many reefs near Paradise Island, but warships from the early 20th century had thick armored bottoms, and with the repairmen on board, they sank incredibly fast. A loud bang from the warship finally brought Diana back from her academic study of men. She stared at the 4 small boats not far away, and the soldiers aboard them, armed with guns. "Oh, they're chasing us," Steve finally snapped out of his own self-deception. Seeing the German soldiers about to land, he wanted to run for the hills. Diana, the Queen's roar, a mixture of anxiety and anger, was timely, and Thea breathed a sigh of relief. It was all right, the plot wouldn't change. Diana, Get out of there, Hippolyta said, not waiting for Diana's response. Archers, get ready, huh? Their cliffs were 1,000 meters from the sea. Why were these warriors suddenly so powerful? As Thea pondered the mystery, a gust of green wind emanated from the queen, instantly enveloping all the surrounding warriors. It was magical equipment. No wonder. Thea didn't expect the warriors to be equipped with the Eye of Horus and their divine bows and arrows. Even Horus, transformed into a centipede, didn't have that many eyes. But this equipment was truly remarkable. Even the queen, without any magical powers at all, could wield it. It must have been a gift from Zeus, her close acquaintance. It's true that Diana was adorned with divine regalia, but as Zeus' mistress, having survived for so many years without being slain by the jealous Hera, Hippolyta's equipment must have been incredibly luxurious. The first round of firefighting between the Amazons and the Germans ended in a complete victory for the queen's side. A hail of arrows streaked across the sky, showering the enemy. The only regret was that the queen arrived in such haste that her force was too small, less than 50 men, while the opposing Germans numbered over 300. Despite the initial barrage, the Germans suffered fewer than 10% casualties. The remaining soldiers, howling and paddling, rapidly closed the gap. Diana, take him and hide. I'll join the fight. Thea now had a certain attachment to Paradise Island. The queen had brought her own guards, all of whom she knew by name. While heavy casualties would have been expected, she was here now, and she wouldn't let that happen. As for the Germans, originally planned to be annihilated, it presumably wouldn't disrupt the timeline, and she felt no compunction in killing them. Before the German soldiers could fully enter the forbidden magic zone, Thea unleashed a barrage of 4 sharp arrows, each imbued with a flash spell. Though this rudimentary spell, originally invented by veteran mages for illumination, proved remarkably effective in combat. The German soldiers on the 4 boats felt as if they were standing at the edge of the sun, their eyes blinded by the intense light. But they were well trained. The leading officer barked orders, and everyone, eyes closed, rowed vigorously. Impressive. Thea sighed softly. Germany's reputation as Europe's strongest army was well deserved. Such discipline was admirable. But given her position, she shot the leader with a measure of respect. But a moment later, surprise crossed her face. The German command system hadn't failed at all. After a captain was killed, a lieutenant took over. After 2 lieutenants were killed, another second lieutenant took over. They were truly elite soldiers. Compared to the American soldiers of the 21st century who couldn't even walk without GPS, these men truly deserved the title of elite. But despite her admiration, Thea didn't stop. Standing there like a mountain, she continued to fire her bow and arrows. She aimed at the German soldiers who had raised their rifles. Just as she had killed 17 soldiers, the Amazons shouted and leaped from the cliff to join the battle. The Germans recovered quickly. The leading lieutenant kept barking orders, and the 200-strong force moved like a machine, their metal bullets unleashing their might on the battlefield. The lieutenant, sporting a beard that might have seemed impressive at the time but looked a bit dirty to Thea, stroked it and looked disdainfully at the gathering Amazons. Natives? Haha. Show them the power of science. His disdainful look infuriated Thea. You're so unfashionable, and I haven't even mentioned your unfashionable beard. A 21st century person being mocked by a 20th century person as a native. This was unacceptable. Shooting him to death would be an easy task. Thea planned to capture him and show him the tortures of the natives. She instantly cast Wind Walk upon herself, her spell imbued with divine power, its power intensifying even further. Like a whirlwind, she charged towards the bearded man. Fire, unaware of the impending danger, the bearded man saw many of his soldiers regrouping, shouting to urge them to fire, aiming their rifles at the female warrior leaping from the cliff. Gunfire rang out continuously, as 50 rifles were trained on the approaching female warrior. Thea's dynamic vision instantly activated. Ballistic analysis indicated that many of the female warriors had been hit. They might be unaware of the firearm's power, or perhaps simply fearless. Of course, Thea couldn't stand by and watch them die. Without even trying to grab the bearded man, she unleashed her full speed, bolting towards the crossfire. While nowhere near the speed of the Flash, her speed now exceeded 800 kilometers per hour. Facing the old-fashioned Mauser rifle, she moved like a gust of wind. To avoid any stray bullets, she enveloped her hands in magical energy, intercepting all the bullets aimed at the female warriors mid-air like a butterfly. You have science, I have magic, With a sudden inspiration, Thea shouted, unconcerned about whether the bearded man understood or not, and unleashed a hail of bullets in the opposite direction. She had never practiced concealed weapons, nor did she carefully aim for accuracy. She used her mental power to roughly determine the direction, not seeking lethality, but simply throwing with all her might, simply to intimidate the enemy. The sound of numerous horse hooves clattered to the ground. The Queen, accompanied by over 30 guards, circled the base of the cliff and began charging the German soldiers' flank. The two sides were very close, and Thea's sudden attack had stunned many. It wasn't until the Queen, clad in her ornate armor, charged the German ranks that they realized their mistake. Their ranks had been broken apart, and they could only stand in groups of 3 or 4, back to back, trying to stop the Amazons' onslaught. Chapter 216, Great Victory. The Queen, now as majestic as a Valkyrie, rode atop a towering white steed, wielding her longsword, slashing left and right, her presence unstoppable. Thea could see auras invisible to ordinary people, and was nearly dazzled by the magical effects she radiated. At a glance, she saw 7 or 8 pieces of equipment with varying effects, some boosting attack, some boosting defense, and seemingly exerting some kind of aura. The surrounding female warrior's combat power was noticeably higher than usual. This was a level 1 alt character equipped with epic gear by the max level Zeus. Thea watched as the Queen slew the German soldiers with such ferocity that they left them wailing for their parents. She deeply understood Zeus's protective heart. The claim that the forbidden magic field protected the Amazons from outsiders was a lie. The real purpose was to protect his mistress. The Queen's divine attire made it clear that any deity, save the God King, would be crushed by the Queen even if they personally entered Paradise Island. Naturally, Thea wouldn't just stand by and watch. She silently channeled her divine power, activating the innate abilities of her chosen one. Eternal Night, the power unique to the goddess of hunting, enveloped a 10-mile radius. The clear sky of the battlefield was instantly bathed in the brilliant moonlight. The women within the area experienced a surge in strength, while the men were severely suppressed. Diana, who had hidden to the side with Steve Trevor, watched her tribesmen fighting fiercely. Thea's night sky had also significantly enhanced her own strength. Feeling boundless power, she gritted her teeth, drew her dagger, and ran out to join the first battle of her life. Steve had been about to join in, but Thea's transformation completely shattered his worldview. Unaware that he was being suppressed by an invisible divine power, he felt his mouth dry, his legs trembling, and he couldn't move a step for a long time. Thea's power enhanced the Queen, the female warriors, and even their mares. Several of the female warriors on foot moved so fast that they left after images. Antiope leaped from her horse, her body twisting in midair, swinging her dagger and spear. When she landed, 7 German soldiers lay lying around her. The strong black woman and the elk, who were not far from the battlefield, heard the exchange of fire here. 1 man and 1 elk quickly rushed over. This was also the first time that Thea saw an elk fighting. Its body gradually began to swell as it ran, and finally became the size of an adult elephant. Its antlers, which were once quite cute, now became as sharp as swords. With its huge body, it rushed into the center of the German soldiers with unstoppable momentum. 4 or 5 soldiers were directly pushed into the sky by its huge kinetic energy. At this time, Steve mustered up his courage and finally took out a German soldier. When he raised his gun to support the female soldiers, he saw such an anti-Darwin elk, and his excitement completely collapsed to the side. Niobe, he is not an enemy. The strong black woman ran a little slower than the elk. She happened to see Steve, who was holding a gun furtively. When she was about to hit him with a javelin, Thea quickly stopped him, avoiding a major change in the timeline. The dark, sturdy woman glared, nearly paralyzing Steve. Then, roaring, she charged into the battlefield, her javelin instantly unleashing. Unlike the other female warriors, she had experienced Thea's eternal night barrier numerous times during her 6 months as a servant, and was well versed in its surging power. She aimed her javelin at the right angle and launched it swiftly, pinning the 2 German soldiers to the ground without a single grunt. The most dazzling figure on the battlefield was undoubtedly Diana. Over the past 6 months, she had gradually shed her immaturity, her convictions and martial prowess surpassing those of her original time and space. Seeing one of the Queen's guards struck and fall, her fury washed away her initial fear. Charging, whirlwind slashes, shield slams, she seemed tireless, constantly charging left and right. The German soldiers, already inferior to the female warriors in every way, were now weakened by the Queen's aura and Thea's discriminatory buffs. This weakened them further, and they found themselves swiftly attacking their opponents, while they themselves were as slow as 80-year-old men. More and more German soldiers fell in pools of blood, and under the heavy psychological pressure, several finally shouted out surrender. Mother Diana heard this surrender, and her belief in justice took over. She quickly ran to Hippolyta to ask. In the original time, due to the heavy casualties of the female warriors and the death of Antiope, neither the Queen nor Diana, in their anger, had mentioned surrender. They slaughtered the Germans without hesitation. But Antiope, far from being killed, hadn't even lost her hair, and the female warriors were only seriously wounded, and 2 were slightly injured, none of them in danger of death. Hippolyta hesitated for a moment. Tie them all up, the Queen pointed at Steve Trevor in the distance. Capture that guy too. I want to ask them why they came to Paradise Island. Diana obeyed naturally. Steve's pustular look caught her eye. Accustomed to the martial spirit of Paradise Island, she despised such weak-kneed individuals. She didn't pay much attention to the so-called man research anymore. She dragged Steve to Hippolyta's horse like a chicken. Thea was practically overjoyed at this sight. After such a bad initial impression, there shouldn't be any further relationship between the two. Great. She happily approached the Queen, ready to watch the show. What are you doing here? I can't say. What's your name? I can't say either. The Queen peppered her with questions, 5 or 6 in a row. Steve either remained silent or insisted on not saying anything. This non-violent, non-cooperative attitude nearly made the Queen laugh. She turned to question the German prisoners. They were just soldiers, intent on pursuing Steve. The reason for this pursuit was probably known only to the captain leading the group, who, unfortunately, was shot dead by Thea before the battle even began. The Queen, not wanting to waste time with Steve, led the prisoners and the main force back to their residence in the central area. As a chosen one of the gods, Thea had the privilege of participating in Steve's small-scale trial. This was her first encounter with the lasso of truth. Honestly, the artifact's divine power wasn't strong, and it was considered relatively weak in terms of pure divine power. However, for some unknown reason, the original forger had incorporated a trace of the power of laws during the forging process, causing the artifact's rank to rapidly increase. This power of laws was nearly unstoppable in the material world. Thea had compared various methods but had found no way to counter the lasso. Thea couldn't come up with a solution, and Steve, a mere mortal, was even more helpless. He poured out his knowledge, recounting it from beginning to end. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217 Ares Must Die. As for his so-called German ambitions to dominate the world, how Americans were eager to help others and save people from danger, and how selfless Steve himself was, fighting for the liberation of all mankind, the people of Paradise Island, represented by the Queen, just listened to his gossip and forgot about it, but no one took it seriously. However, Thea was a little speechless. You have to know that these words were said under the lasso of truth. For Steve, they were the absolute truth. He truly believed that Germany was evil and the United States was righteous. He was willing to sacrifice himself for his country. Such great sentiments made Thea sweat. Compared to him, Thea's patriotism was probably not as big as a sesame seed. This kid is still young, just like that patriotic young man next door in Marvel who also joined Steve. They have not realized the dirty things in politics. The war has been going on for 4 years, involving 27 nations and costing 25 million lives. Countless innocent elderly people, women, and children have been slaughtered. The power of weapons has never been greater than it is today. I must go back and save my people. Steve's tears welled up as he spoke, and everyone, save Thea, who knew the historical truth, was moved. Mother. This must have been Ares's doing. Diana instantly came to this somewhat bizarre conclusion based on her own worldview. Thea wanted to speak up for Ares. This god deserved such a fate. It was humanity's own greed that was at work. What did the god of war have to do with this? They just blindly pinned the blame on him? All good things were the work of wise human leaders, while all bad things were the work of the evil god Ares? Originally, Ares's portfolio was solely war, But in this long campaign of blaming humanity, humans had automatically helped him acquire a host of portfolios, such as conquest, bloodlust, and destruction. He had literally been dragged from neutral to evil. Hippolyta was initially bewildered by her daughter's words, but then recalled the stories she'd instilled in her about Ares' untold evil and lack of conscience, leaving her speechless. Ignoring the strange looks from the crowd, Diana confidently laid out her theory, tracing mythology to the current state of the world, concluding, only Ares has such a powerful ability to commit such wicked deeds. Finding no response, she turned to Thea for support. Artemis, you think so, don't you? It took Thea a second to register that she was being addressed. What else could she say? Ares wasn't innocent either, he had played a role in the war. Diana nodded vigorously, clearly stating, you're absolutely right. Ares must die, and Antiope, whose time and space had already been frozen, suddenly thought of something and whispered, Your Majesty, dealing with Ares is the Amazon's mission. Thea also made her position clear at this moment, Your Majesty, I can sense Ares' divine power still lingering in the world. This is our mission. She could sense some kind of divine power, but just because she couldn't, didn't mean the Queen, clad in divine attire, couldn't sense it. Steve had just crashed, and the Germans were still at sea, yet the Queen had already rushed to the coast with a large group of thugs. The battlefield at that time was not close to residential areas. How did she get there? The Queen must have some kind of detection and early warning device, otherwise she couldn't have been so quick. With the support of the two, Diana gained confidence and looked at her mother with a piercing gaze. Hippolyta, with a stern expression, ignored the three and left the courtroom first. Everyone filed out, Diana walking dejectedly at the end. Thea glanced around. Huh? Steve was still bound by the lasso. She untied it and handed it to Diana. As the Xianxia say, this piece of equipment carries a lot of consequences, so she didn't dare put it in her pocket in public. Niobe, take him down and clean up. Thea handed the now refreshed Steve to the dark-haired woman. Surely, no matter how hungry he was, he wouldn't attack a bear like Niobe, would he? Thea, what should I do? Diana asked worriedly. The girl was clearly upset, finally stopping calling her by her long name. Thea could only encourage her, stay true, Diana. No matter what, I'll support you. With Thea's support, Diana's fear of the outside world instantly subsided. A firm belief resurfaced in her brow. She told Thea to wait for her and hurried off alone. What was she doing? Thea wondered, was she going to get that treacherous god-slaying sword? This guy was really lucky. Aside from the sword's malfunction, he'd soon be fully equipped with divine armor and could crush anyone who challenged him. Shortly after returning to their residence, the sturdy dark-skinned woman returned with Steve, who had barely washed himself. Mr. Trevor, do you have any further plans to prevent the war? Thea saw Steve enter the room and stared blankly at the bread she had baked, fearing that the future leader of the Sky Eye Society would starve to death. She quickly tossed him a piece of bread, and only spoke after he devoured it in a few bites and handed him a glass of water. Your American English is so authentic. You have a great talent for languages. I'm going back to London first. You know London, the capital of the United Kingdom? I need to submit a mission to my superiors, and then I can focus on helping you find that guy? Ares. Yes, that's his name. Steve was about to tease Thea her beauty, but when the divine power in her eyes pierced him, he dared not speak any more nonsense and honestly described his plan. What a rubbish plan. This guy is deliberately using Diana as his free bodyguard. If Ares hadn't intervened, Diana, with her limited worldly experience, would have been unable to find anyone in 100 years. This war between gods isn't about strategy or planning, it's about who's more foolish. A naive naivete meets a ruthless one, and these two half-brothers are in a perfect showdown of who's worse. Although this action is foolish and the outcome has no bearing on the world's situation, Thea has no choice but to fight this supposedly epic battle to gather energy and return home. Niobe, I'm going on this fateful expedition with Diana. While our relationship wasn't great at first, we're now good friends. Do you plan to stay or come with us? The dark-skinned woman hesitated for a moment. She wasn't Diana, so single-mindedly yearning for the outside world. For her, living on the island and dying on it was her ultimate destiny. I understand, my friend. Thank you for your care over the past few days. I will now return you to freedom. I will discuss your affairs with the Queen and allow you to return to the Amazon. Chapter 218 Niobe's Gift. After Thea finished speaking, She took out her longbow and touched her shoulder lightly without waiting for the black woman's reaction, which was considered as the termination of the verbal contract between the two. The kindness she showed moved the black woman so much that she knelt on the ground and cried. Steve didn't understand Greek and didn't know what they were saying, so he could only stare blankly. The black woman cried for a while, and realized that this was not the time to express her feelings. She prostrated herself before Thea. This was a normal process, and Thea didn't stop her. She felt a little sad when she saw the black woman shed tears and said goodbye to her. It might be more than 100 years before they meet again, if Hippolytus still lets her go to the island. At the same time, she was also thinking about who to find to do the promising job of feeding elk in the future. But before she could ponder for long, the dark-skinned woman returned, handing Thea an exquisite jade box. Artemis, this is a treasure of our lost Amazon tribe. We abandoned the Greek gods and embraced the Egyptian gods. It wasn't until 2,000 years ago that we returned to Paradise Island, but we can no longer activate its magic. Perhaps you are its master. She pressed the jade box into Thea's hands and, without waiting for her to refuse, nodded emphatically before leaving like a gust of wind. What is this? So mysterious. Thea examined the box. It was square and impenetrable, even impenetrable to her spiritual power. It must be a specially made box. She opened the box, revealing a palm-sized disc, slightly battered, as if it had been subjected to heavy pressure. It was neither gold nor silver, and a dazzling metal chain adorned the top. It looked like an amulet. Thea removed it from the box and examined it carefully. A closer look left her completely stunned. The front of the disc depicted a rising throne, while the back depicted a goddess seated cross-legged on the ground, wings outstretched. Thea, now a master of theology, quickly returned the amulet to the jade box. This was the image of the Egyptian deity Isis, renowned for her immense magical powers. She claimed to possess the true names of countless gods, controlling all but the father of the gods, Ra. She was now a member of the Greek pantheon, an active member of the electorate, and thus had no chance of embracing the Egyptian gods. Even more devastating, this goddess, known for her boundless power, was Horus's biological mother. Though Thea often lied to herself that Horus could live for another 200 years, the eagerness of the Eagles in their quest for vengeance made it clear that this was a lie. If the Eagles knew, how could Isis, Horus's mother, not know? It wasn't that the dark-haired woman was trying to trick her. Even with a quick glance, she understood the amulet's efficacy. It was a foolproof operation. Anyone with a certain level of spiritual power who wore the amulet could harness the lingering magic within, allowing Isis to possess them. In ancient times, perhaps Isis herself descended in person, but now, in this age of subsistence allowances, at best, a projection. But Thea didn't dare gamble. What if Isis, seeking revenge for her son's murder, recklessly stormed the material plane? Perhaps, by teaming up with Diana, they could kill her. Then, having murdered her son and wife, wouldn't Osiris be next? Then, she and the Egyptian pantheon would be sworn enemies. While there was a high chance of obtaining a pair of eyes of Horus, the sheer absurdity of that was clear. It was understandable that the dark-haired woman and the others had no reaction to the amulet. This was a forbidden magic zone established by Zeus. No one of the God King's caliber could suppress anyone here. Diana, her own daughter, was being suppressed like an ordinary person, let alone this object belonging to a hostile pantheon. After 2,000 years, it's only got a few cracks and hasn't shattered into powder, which is quite impressive. Oh. What should I do? This amulet is filled with enormous magical power. I feel reluctant to give it back to the black woman, but I don't dare to use it myself. Fortunately, all the modern gods are dead, otherwise this thing would be sensed as soon as it leaves Paradise Island. After thinking it over, the only stupid way Thea can think of is dark magic, advanced energy absorption, to continuously absorb the magic power from the amulet and feed it back to herself. But Thea's magical attainments at the moment are far from enough, so this idea can only be put aside for the time being. Artemis, are you still willing to help me? Just as Thea lowered her head to calculate what other means she had to deal with this amulet, Diana rushed in. Diana was now clad in a fiery crimson half-plate, with silver bracelets of protection on her arms, a counterfeit Godslayer sword and lasso of truth slung at her waist, a divine shield slung across her back, and the winged sandals of Hermes on her feet. Her dazzling attire made Thea's eyes sparkle. She was truly envious. Thea had been waiting for this moment for 6 months. She declared with absolute certainty, Diana, I'm willing to help you. This must be the mission the gods sent me here for. This mission was a theory Thea had devised over the past 6 months. She couldn't discuss the future. To preserve their friendship, she needed an explanation for her post-war disappearance. It was best to blame the gods for everything, even if Diana could come up with anything she could. Let's go, the two of them agreed, and Diana, overjoyed, pulled Thea out. After 2 steps, Thea remembered Steve and quickly turned back to pull him along. Diana was a little confused about why she had to bring this man with her. Thea explained to her that the outside world discriminated against women, and having a man around could solve a lot of problems. Discrimination. Diana exploded on the spot when she heard the word. Regardless of her secret action plan, she grabbed Steve and wanted to ask him everything. Do you have female soldiers in the outside world? There was no hesitation about this, and Steve immediately shook his head. Do you have female generals? Steve thought about it carefully, and seemed to have never heard of it, so he continued to shake his head. How can this be? The question was too vague. Not to mention Steve, a private, even if he called a professor, he couldn't answer it. He could only shake his head again. Women have no status at all? This is not written in the book. This time Diana didn't ask poor Steve, but asked Thea, who she thought was very wise. It's not that they have no status at all. The highest leaders of several countries are women. Then she sprinkled salt in Diana's eyes, which had brightened a little. But they have no real power. As for the books you mentioned, I can only say that those books were written by men. Women do not have the publishing rights for the time being. These words made Diana dizzy. She stared at the only man in the room with a bad face. If he was not kind by nature, he would probably have picked up the god-killing sword and poked a few transparent holes in him. Chapter 219 Farewell. Although Thea was determined to break them up, she couldn't bear to watch Diana, now in a state of temper, stab Steve to death. She consoled Diana and returned to her room to change back into her Kevlar combat uniform. Donning it again after so many days, she felt as if she were transported back to the bloody days of Gotham. She looked at the Amazon half-armor she had worn for over 6 months. She realized that even if she returned 100 years from now, Hippolyta might not let her onto the island. It was a souvenir, after all. She stored it in the bloodmark space. Only then did Thea realize that the armor barely qualified as magical equipment, albeit with minimal effects. Seeing Diana still waiting outside, Thea surveyed the room's furnishings. The next time she returned would be 100 years from now. She gently closed the door and left the small room she had spent 6 months in. Let's go. Diana had no idea they wouldn't be able to return anytime soon. She simply imagined how determined Thea was to help her. She took her hand and whispered soothing words. Steve, the follower, had sharp eyes. He immediately noticed the difference in Thea's clothes. The colors were dark red and the shape was extremely beautiful. Is this the clothes of the locals? Are you kidding me? Steve compared the armor of the female warriors he had seen during the day and felt that they were 2 different styles. But Steve didn't think about it for long before he found that the elk that was very anti-Darwin during the day had caught up with him. He quickly took 2 steps to the 2 women, pointed at the elk following behind, and whispered, "That deer is catching up." Thea glanced at him without saying a word. How fresh. This is what I called. My unicorn hasn't been summoned yet. Wouldn't you faint when you see the unicorn? That's our messenger of God, our friend, Diana explained kindly. Steve's mouth dropped open. This deer is amazing. It can actually grow. This goes against Darwin's theory of evolution. Do you know Darwin, anti-Darwin? Thea's eyes lit up at the word. Steve was just about to explain the latest human research to these uncivilized natives when Thea quickly ran over to the elk, hugged its large head, and said happily, "You've been with me for so long, and I've never given you a good name. That follower just reminded me. Anti-Darwin. Fandral Stag Elm. What do you think of that name?" The elk rolled its eyes in a very human way. Thea agreed without the slightest embarrassment. Fandral in the world would dream of having a pair of antlers like this, symbolizing the arched root. You're much happier than him. It's settled. Thea, who has trouble finding names, sighed happily as if a huge burden had been lifted from her shoulders, and her steps became much lighter. Have you made up your mind? The 2 women had barely left the central residential area when Hippolyta and Antiope emerged from the shade of the trees. Mother, your majesty. There was a moment of silence. Artemis, can I have a word with you? Hippolyta unexpectedly approached Thea first. What for? Thea was a bit bewildered. It didn't seem like she had anything to do here, but she respectfully stepped aside, ready to listen to what the Queen had to say. But the Queen's first word startled her. "You're not from this time, are you? You're from the future." Well, Thea saw the Queen's expression was very calm, as if she had made up her mind. She racked her brains but couldn't come up with an excuse. "You don't have to deny it so quickly. I've accompanied the God King and witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the birth and extinction of species, and I've also encountered time travelers. I simply want to ask you, who knows the future? 2 questions, Your Majesty, please speak." Facing this knowledgeable mistress of Zeus, Thea felt helpless. God only knew what equipment she possessed, so she could only lower her posture as much as possible. Is Diana's journey in danger? Will her honor be recognized in human society? It's a safe journey. Thea answered the first question readily. If we hadn't considered the god-slaying sword you gave her, the worry wouldn't have even occurred. As for the second question, Thea considered it for a moment before answering word by word. Human society will initially be reluctant to recognize a demigod, but they will eventually acknowledge Diana's heroic deeds. Then I'm relieved. I'll give this to you as a souvenir. Paradise Island will always welcome you. The Queen handed Thea an emerald green ring and walked towards Diana with a smile. Oh my goodness. Thea felt a surge of emotion the moment she saw the ring. The elk not far away also instantly set their sights on it. This is Artemis's ring. This must be one of the equipment stolen by Hippolyta. This woman is such a sly thief. She took the equipment that was rightfully hers and gave it to her as a parting gift. And Thea had to accept her gratitude. The moment she received the ring, Thea understood how it worked. This was a piece of equipment forged by divine power from the elk's habitat. The ring had a large space. While its primary purpose was for the elk to rest, it could also accommodate other things. Tears streamed down Thea's face. Finally, a space ring. Finally, she didn't have to force her equipment into the unicorn space. After all the hard work, Thea remembered something else. Your Majesty, what about Nabi? She's a proud Amazon warrior. She'll return to the tribe, the Queen said calmly. Thank you for your kindness. Thea, feeling completely fine, happily slipped the ring on her right ring finger. She understood the various rings women wore, and the ring finger represented passionate love. She thought this would surely repel a lot of flies. Really, the people of the underworld weren't so particular. The Mandarin from Marvel Studios wore 10 rings and no one complained. She was just starting out, and she was sure she'd be wearing even more magic rings in the future. Thea returned the elk to the ring and stood aside, watching Antiope's constant instructions to Diana. Finally, she placed her forehead protector on Diana's forehead, patted her shoulder, and left. When the Queen finally left, Diana's face was full of sorrow. She hugged Thea and her voice was a little choked. Mother said that if I leave, I will never come back. Thea patted her on the back and comforted her. As long as you complete your mission, you will come back here one day. This is your home. Go, take courage, this is your destined path. No matter what the future holds, I will accompany you through this journey. Sure enough, when the sense of mission was mentioned, Diana regained most of her spirits. Although her expression was still a little depressed, she finally picked up some fighting spirit. Chapter 220 Leaving Paradise Island. The night mist swirled around the three of them. Silence reigned, the only sound to be heard was the fading clatter of the Queen's hoofs. Thea grabbed hold of the sorrowful Diana and said, Don't look back. Let's go. The original Diana might have been consumed by self-blame for the deaths of her people and Antiope, a crushing sense of guilt that had driven her to a near self-exile. But now Paradise Island was nearly intact, and with a few captured German soldiers available for the female warriors to study in their spare time, her sense of mission remained undimmed, but her drive to leave was noticeably less intense than it had been in her original time and space. Thea couldn't fathom the reason, but she could see that Hippolyta's words had shaken Diana's resolve. She couldn't offer much consolation. Anyone would hesitate to leave a place they'd lived in for 5,000 years, never to return. Diana, a young woman with no experience of human society, would especially harbor a subtle fear of the outside world. She had to force her way in. Thea dragged Diana aboard. As for Steve, he'd already jumped in and waited for them, needing no further entreaties. This boat doesn't seem to have oars, does it? As a spy, Steve had a knack for reading people's expressions. Diana's mood was clearly off, and he hesitated to speak to the two women. He searched the small, palm-sized boat but couldn't find any propulsion system, so he could only ask Thea, who seemed somewhat friendly. No oars. How did they get off the island in the original plot? Thea glanced around but couldn't see any oars. Did they drift away? She didn't bother looking anymore. Once she was out of Paradise Island, her light-absorbing physique finally returned to normal. The tranquil night cast a flood of moonlight across her pretty face, casting a halo of sanctity. She summoned the mage's hand that had frightened Steve once more, manipulating the boat to raise the sails. This knowledge Thea had learned as a child watching old Robert sail out to sea. She cast another powerful wind spell, and the wind blew against the sails, sending the boat careening away from Paradise Island's shore at almost full speed. So it's controlled by sails. You're quite advanced. I thought you used oars. Steve felt a little embarrassed. In the dark, he had indeed missed a lone mast. To appear less foolish, he quickly explained. Thea waved her hand, unwilling to listen. Do you know where we are now? Or how far away from London? You don't even know where you are. Steve despised them, thinking they were uncivilized natives after all. But he remained polite. I was flying from Germany to England, and somehow my route veered off into the sea. I think we're in the North Sea now. Do you know the North Sea? Stop talking nonsense. I know the North Sea. The Quinn group had a branch in Norway, but that was a century later. Thea had visited Europe as a child and had seen some of the landmarks. Now, being treated like a barbarian by Steve lingered. She felt the magic power within her. Under the night sky, her spell consumption would be somewhat reduced. Focusing her magic power on the surface of her body, she slowly ascended to the sky, as Steve looked as if he had seen a ghost. When she reached 100 meters in the air, Thea summoned her divine power and opened the Eye of Horus. 1 nautical mile south, nothing. 2, 5, 10 miles, nothing. She turned her head and gazed north again. 1 nautical mile, 3, and finally, 7 miles away, she saw the coastline. She carefully examined the clothing and signs of the people on shore. She retracted her gaze and slowly descended onto the boat, looking at Steve speechlessly. North Sea, damn. This is the Eastern Mediterranean. 7 miles north is Crete. It seemed impossible. In the movie, they rowed without oars, set sail without direction, and drifted from Paradise Island to London in one night. That's way too close to England. Zeus was powerful, sure, but he was from the Greek pantheon. What kind of place was England? That was Celtic territory. How could you hide your mistress right on the enemy's doorstep? Aren't you afraid of being caught and used as a sacrifice? Crete was a logical choice, as it was a place Zeus frequented. Greece was crowded with people, making it difficult for Zeus to do many things. Crete, however, offered no such concerns. The numerous islands nearby made it a perfect place to hide one without anyone noticing. Crete, Steve, whose geography grades were excellent, was puzzled. The plane had been heading east, but now it seemed to have landed west, making him doubt his ability to find his way. London was still a long way off, so the three of them couldn't just drift over. Whether they needed to find faster transportation to London or to replenish their food and water, they would need to go ashore. Why don't we just go find Ares? He must be where the war is most intense. Diana, finally regaining some of her spirits in the sea breeze, asked Thea, who was discussing the route with Steve, with a puzzled look on her face. This question truly stumped Thea. She couldn't say her mother's story was all nonsense, that Ares was currently playing the victim in London. Nor could she claim the choice she was making was meaningless. Even if she were 10 times more powerful, she couldn't prevent the war, not to mention the even more intense battle 20 years from now. Did any of this have anything to do with Ares? Yes, but not much. You were wronging him. Unable to think of a good excuse, she could only glance at Steve beside her. Steve, now the epitome of patriotic youth and the spirit of freedom and democracy, spoke with righteous indignation about the countless deaths Dr. Poison's research would cause, the impact his trip to London would have on the war, and how many innocent lives it could save. He spoke with unwavering sincerity throughout the conversation. Although Diana was still skeptical of his combat abilities, she was moved by his words and immediately decided to go to London. The three of them reached a consensus. Next, they needed to find transportation. Thea didn't dare take out her skateboard. Even the most naive Steve would be suspicious of something so sci-fi. It was the same reason Gideon had repeatedly tried to prevent Thea from acquiring futuristic equipment aboard the Wave Rider. Who was more foolish than the other? Reverse engineering could reveal a lot. If your Amazonian armor wasn't so unusual, Her combat uniform wouldn't have been revealed. Thea was already preparing to rely primarily on magic for the upcoming battle. After determining their position, the three lost interest in conversation. Thea began to absorb the essence of the night alone. Diana pondered her own thoughts, and Steve pinched his thigh, trying to wake up from this unscientific dream. Chapter 221. Is it a coincidence? Not at all. As the three landed, Thea sensed the deep, venomous 1918 values: discrimination. Discrimination against women. Discrimination against the three, whose appearance and clothing were distinctly different from the locals. From the moment they entered the harbor, things were rough. Customs officers tried to extort money, local tyrants pressured them into buying things, and several seemingly small children ran past them, clearly trying to steal. They couldn't possibly be so rude as to attack them. The children, having run past them several times, noticed that the three, despite their impressive appearance, didn't actually have a single drachma on them. The children gradually dispersed in discontent. The reality was the three had no money at all. Diana understood the concept of currency, but applying it to practice was still a work in progress. Steve had fled in such a hurry, leaving himself penniless. Although Greece was an allied power, his identity as a spy was a secret. He couldn't possibly contact pro-American elements in the area just for a few bucks, could he? If he did, he'd be court-martialed. Let alone Thea. Her wallet had been left on the wayrider, and even if she had it, she wouldn't have dared to take it out. It was 1918, and printing technology and paper quality were vastly different from those of later times. As the night grew darker, Thea turned a corner, created a clone, and approached the local tyrants who had been forcing her to buy. After a round of beatings and kicks, the clone handed the original 3 bills. Oh my! How poor! Thea tested the purchasing power of the money. 2 $100 bills could only buy a jar of honey and a bag of nuts on the street. This purchasing power left her speechless. No wonder you're so broke 100 years later. Things are expensive, the currency is worthless, and the people are idle. It's a wonder your economy isn't in trouble. What's wrong? When Diana reached for food from a street vendor, Thea quickly grabbed her. We don't have any money. You can't take other people's things. Diana suddenly realized that this quality of a righteous hero was commendable. She would never bully the weak. So what should we do? Thea hadn't come up with a good idea. Robbing 1 or 2 people would be fine, but too many would definitely expose them. Besides, those guys were so poor, the effort and reward were completely disproportionate. Actually, we could go to the tavern. They usually have gambling and stuff there. Steve, back in human society, felt less afraid of the 2 witches around him. He felt like he was alive again, and this time, he finally offered a suggestion. Thea's eyes lit up instantly. What a great idea. She patted Steve on the shoulder. Good idea. With her personality, she'd go for something big. How much money could she make by going to the tavern and robbing the common people? She could find a casino. She had clairvoyance. She reached out to stop a heavy-set, seemingly muscular man passing by. Before he could get angry, she cast a suggestion spell, and the man instantly transformed into a kitten, telling Thea everything he knew about several nearby casinos with little connections. You're using magic again, Diana said, speechless, but for the sake of their current situation, she couldn't say anything. Magic, the word magic, Steve's mind raced, and many irrationalities seemed to be explained, but even more questions surfaced. He knew he held little power now. And the 2 women wouldn't pay him any attention. He could only observe silently. Only won $20,000, and that's it. These people are so insignificant. Thea's ambitious money-making plan was severely thwarted at the first hurdle. Her clairvoyance remained incredibly sharp, but the damned casino's psychological tolerance was too weak. Just $20,000, and the so-called owner burst out, tearfully complaining about his difficulties. Kind-hearted Diana had no choice but to drag Thea out, which triggered the previous conversation. But the amount was too little, so the 3 of them found a slightly more luxurious casino. Thea realized she had been overly cautious. What kind of experts could there be in such a remote seaside town? With Diana and her skills, even if they faced a formidable enemy, they could easily escape. She chose blackjack, which best utilized her clairvoyance. After 3 rounds, the chips in front of Thea were visibly piling up. Last one, let's go after we are done. Hey? Diana. Thea had guessed another one correctly and was happily counting the chips. Turning to give an order, she suddenly noticed Diana's expressionless face, her eyes fixed blankly ahead. Something was wrong. Thea immediately looked around, finding everyone stuck in the same position they'd been a second before. The world seemed shrouded in a gray veil, everything at a standstill. Was the Eye of Horus gone too? When Thea tried to observe nearby movements, she was surprised to find it unactivated, as if it didn't even exist. "Hey, little girl, stop looking around," a crisp voice rang out from not far away. Who? Thea was horrified. The enemy was so close. Without even a moment to consider whether they had any ill intentions, she tapped the ground and leaped back, trying to distance herself. The attack she'd expected didn't materialize, and only then did she glance at the person who had spoken. Huh? Who is this woman? Amidst the generally dark and grayish-white surroundings, a woman in emerald green court robes should have stood out, yet Shah hadn't seen her. It seemed she'd been sitting at this table earlier, gambling? Her chair was only 2 meters away from Shah, yet her memory of her was surprisingly vague. Shah couldn't tell if she was friend or foe, but she knew she must be formidable. She tried to summon the divine bow again, only to find that the bow, once so closely associated with her, seemed to be responding from afar. "Are you looking for me?" "What's the matter?" "No, young lady. It's not me looking for you, it's you looking for me. Is your friend a Greek demigod?" It took me a while to get around her, so I'll cut to the chase. My name is Nimue Nwandu, the youngest sister of the goddess of the Elysian Lake. "Little lady, what do you want from me?" Shia suddenly realized. She was right. She was indeed looking for her. But wasn't she looking for her future self? Few people know her real name these days, but her nickname is widely known. She once traveled to the Eastern world at the invitation of Kublai Khan, and thanks to her unparalleled divination skills, she earned the title Lady Xanadu. Rumors also circulated that she and Merlyn had a brief romance. In short, this was a powerful character who appeared before Thea's eyes. While perhaps inferior to a maxed-out character like Zeus, Thea could easily crush Thea. "Lady Xanadu," Thea quickly bowed her head in respect. Her respect for Hippolytus stemmed from her status, and for Xanadu. She was entirely due to her strength, a fact reinforced by the sight of Diana imprisoned. Chapter 222, Guidance from Lady Xanadu. Descendant of Merlyn, my divination predicted your arrival. If my interpretation is correct, I promise to show you the way forward. But my memory is quite good, and I don't recall ever saying that. Do you know the problem? Lady Xanadu asked casually, tending to her nails. Ouch, Thea groaned inwardly. How could these millennia-old creatures be so shrewd? If Hippolyta could guess it, she could probably figure it out, too. Isn't time travel supposed to be secretive and grand? Anyone could figure it out. How could it be secretive at all? Seeing her bow her head in silence, Lady Xanadu's amber eyes flickered. Did my future self say that? My future self asked you to come to my present self for guidance on your magical cultivation. Yes, Mom, Thea admitted immediately. She couldn't remember what the swamp monster had said. It had been vague. Opening the bloodline could be considered guidance, and so could seeking personal guidance from the present self. It was open to interpretation. But now that she'd said it herself, Thea naturally took the initiative and admitted it first. Unexpectedly, Lady Xanadu didn't even glance at her. She lazily said, "Nonsense. You're indeed a descendant of Merlyn. His tendency to talk nonsense is pretty much inherited, huh?" She looked at Thea's horrified eyes and settled into a more comfortable position. How could someone as casual as me make such a solemn promise? You must have made it up. Thea was speechless, embarrassed. She had witnessed this person's casual nature. Perhaps in the time and space of 2008, you'd just say it casually. You'd forget it immediately, never taking it to heart. It was because Thea had a strong sense of crisis and was constantly seeking self-learning. Otherwise, by the time she came to teach, it might have been too late. Lady Xanadu lit a cigarette and took a puff. A flash of golden light appeared beside her, and a deck of cards appeared on the round table. The cards rotated automatically, silently, at a rapid pace, emitting a rhythm that Thea couldn't understand. Finally, everything fell silent, leaving only a bronze card plate suspended in midair. Lady Xanadu picked up the card and examined it intently, then held it up to Thea, revealing a scene of a white-bearded old man lecturing. Enlightenment? Guidance? It seems to explain everything. Judging from the cards, I really need to guide you. Did my future self guide you? Had my future self guided you? Thea was perplexed. Normally, successfully opening her bloodline was enlightenment, but she could also say no. Divination was like that, it could only provide 3/10 of truth, leaving the other 70 to guesswork. She gritted her teeth and stamped her feet. After all, her place wasn't the only outlet for magic. Considering their connection, even if she got angry, she wouldn't resort to violence, right? In reality, Thea wasn't afraid of a fight. Through her constant calls, Artemis's silver moon longbow drew ever closer. With a divine bow in hand, coupled with Zeus's lightning bolt, the dimensional rift would shatter with a single strike. Then, she could contact Diana and team up. Even if she couldn't defeat them, she could still escape. No. Your future hasn't been revealed to me, Thea observed anxiously. Lady Xanadu was truly stunned by the card's results. She'd originally been passing through Crete, curious about what might be happening there, and had come to visit out of curiosity. Unexpectedly, the topic of the future had become a major issue, and things suddenly became more serious. To be cautious, she drew 2 more cards. The results were even more ambiguous, but one thing was certain, Thea was indeed related to her. Lady Xanadu, who had relied on this divination to defraud people for thousands of years, was also a little shocked. Damn it. What do you mean by related? Merlyn's relationship confirmed the two of them, but was this connection the same as the guidance? Unfortunately, the cards couldn't speak. Lady Xanadu rested her chin on her hand, pondering. Matters concerning the future were no small matter, and she couldn't help but be cautious. After a long moment of deliberation, she finally looked up at Thea. Descendant of Merlyn, I'm a bit busy. She blushed slightly at the words, but continued calmly. I'm busy and don't have time to teach you, but I can provide you with clues to find someone who can. Without waiting for Thea to react, she reached out and pulled out a dozen cards from thin air, laying them face down in a row, and placed them on the table. Choose one from here, and surrender your future to fate. Let the Supreme Being choose your path. Nonsense. Thea had always scoffed at the idea of fate. If it were predetermined, I'd still be drinking in a Star City bar. I had nothing better to do than come to 1918 and gamble. But Lady Xanadu seemed resolute. She truly had no intention of accepting a disciple. Xia herself wasn't interested in being a lunatic shaman. Perhaps choosing a card was the true guidance. She scanned the cards again, but still no effect. Over a dozen cards looked identical from the back. Her right hand brushed over them, but she couldn't detect a single magical fluctuation. Xia kept running her mind over numbers, her second place in the family hierarchy, Merlyn and the 12 Knights, her time of travel on Wednesday. She came up with a multitude of numbers, each one seemingly meaningful. But she knew they were ultimately meaningless. Her future depended on her own, regardless of who guided her. Making up her mind, she pointed to the second card on the left. Are you sure? Lady Xanadu, receiving her confirmation, flipped over the card. It showed a foot soldier in plain clothes, holding a spear. Not only was he wounded in the knee, but his body was riddled with arrows. Who is this guy? Whose wizard had been shot like this? Thea gathered her thoughts and waited for Lady Xanadu to interpret the cards. A veteran who died in battle. Considering this incident involves Merlyn and me, this guy's family history can also be traced back to the time of Arthur. Lady Xanadu seemed to notice Thea's bewilderment and offered some further analysis. This card is quite new, meaning he died recently. The fact that Arthur is involved suggests he's also British. A veteran also suggests he wasn't high-ranking, not a general or a king, but simply a common soldier. Combining these clues, you can search for him. The veteran's descendants will provide the knowledge you need. This is your destiny. It was like finding a needle in a haystack. Even in the 21st century, with Thea's wealth, connections, and internet access, it would have been incredibly difficult, let alone at this point in time when she was completely in the dark. Fortunately, she had done a lot of preliminary research in Star City and had researched several well-known mages. Thea had seen the non-confidential parts of their family history. They were soldiers, died on the Somme battlefield in World War I, and were related to Arthur. There was only one family that met these conditions, the Constantine family. Chapter 223 New Divination. Several conditions met. Born into poverty, their ancestors perished in battle in Europe, and they belonged to a magical family with close ties to Arthur and Merlyn. However, with the advent of modern society, the bloodline had thinned, leaving generations of ordinary people. For example, the young Constantine's magical powers were mediocre initially, only growing stronger through his subsequent suicidal adventures. But at this point in time, Not only was John Constantine not yet born, but even his father, who would later abuse him, wasn't yet an adult. How could a child, who hadn't even awakened yet, teach her? Thea stared intently at Madame Xanadu, seeking further clarification, but she shook her head, refusing to elaborate, simply telling her, "What you need is right there. As for how to get it, you'll have to figure it out yourself." Another ambiguous statement, anything goes. Force would surely be the easiest. Find their house, kick down the door, and steal all the books with text. This method seemed quick, but it carried significant risks. Would Constantine seek revenge when he grew up? That was for sure. He was the man nicknamed Zha Kang, and his moral compass wasn't much higher than a time traveler's. Xia didn't want to return to Star City to find a group of hellish demons playing landlord in her own home. If force wasn't enough, she could only resort to soft tactics. As long as her father willingly handed over the magic book, he wouldn't mind. But what was his father lacking right now? Everything would have to be handled improvisationally after finding someone. As Lady Xanadu was about to remove the barrier, Xia suddenly thought of something she could consult with the expert. "Madam, wait a moment. I have another matter I'd like to ask your advice on." Lady Xanadu, perhaps feeling that dismissing Xia so hastily was a bit excessive, withdrew her arm, sat dignified, and prepared to listen. "I have an ancient Egyptian amulet. If I use it directly, I'm afraid it will attract the attention of the gods. Is there any way I can drain the amulet's magic without alerting the gods?" Thea understood the principle of not displaying wealth, but this person, so detached and a Celtic figure, surely wouldn't be interested in the belongings of Egyptian gods. Thea was gambling, betting that her vision wouldn't be enough to appreciate her own possessions. Unfortunately, Lady Xanadu's expression was as calm as water, and it was impossible to tell what she was thinking. "Can you show it to me?" Thea spread her hands. "I can't take it out in this enchantment." Snap! Lady Xanadu snapped her fingers. "Now I can, huh?" Thea immediately felt a connection to her bloodline space and the divine bow. She glanced at Lady Xanadu. This person's understanding of space is so profound. Compared to the priest warriors like Vendel, Hawkgirl, and Queen's Eye who have lived for countless years, immortality is the greatest benefit to those with magical powers. This was no time for overthinking. Thea quickly pulled out the jade box from her ring and placed it on the table. She had already moved everything into the ring back on the boat, and the unicorn cheered for a long time. Lady Xanadu reached out and opened the jade box, letting out a soft whoa, before bursting into laughter. "Isis! You bitch, you've actually fallen to this point." Haha. Seeing Lady Xanadu's breathless laughter, Thea felt a sense of relief. She'd seen the two of them had a grudge. And that was a good thing. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. After a while of laughing, Lady Xanadu realized she'd lost her composure a bit and coughed twice. "Little girl, what did you want to do?" Thea's sweat broke out and repeated her request. "Is that so?" Lady Xanadu didn't answer directly. Instead, she surveyed her with her amber eyes, then lowered her head in thought. "Originally I wouldn't have answered your question, but since you've made me happy, I'll give you a piece of advice. This amulet is indeed full of magical power, and it's wise for you not to wear it rashly. However, no matter how powerful it is, it's still a dead object. There are still many things in the world that can restrain it. As for absorbing it, while there aren't many methods, there are some." Madame Xanadu paused. "Some methods can be used, but you may not be able to use them." Thea understood this principle. There are countless powerful people in the world. Telling Thea that the anti-life equation can solve this amulet is useless. It's simply unrealistic. "So what do you mean?" Thea was a little confused by the old woman's thoughts. Madame Xanadu snapped her fingers, and countless cards reappeared before them. "Divination. Divination the method that best suits you, then you should start quickly." Thea noticed that after Madame Xanadu finished speaking, she crossed her legs and remained silent. What did she mean? Her mind raced for a while, and fortunately, Thea was quite astute and immediately understood. Oh my god, this is asking for benefits. She definitely didn't want money, so it had to be magical equipment. Thea tentatively took out a black mist dagger and shook it, only to find that Lady Xanadu didn't even raise an eyelid. Sure enough, the dagger was too low level. Thea searched her bag again. Hello? This one seemed suitable. She pulled out the Horus sphere she'd found on Purgatory Island. With the fall of Horus, the sphere's power had inevitably begun to wane, but she'd only sealed it temporarily, preparing to absorb it back in Star City. Now, For the greater amulet of Isis, she had to sacrifice Horus's smaller sphere. Huh? The Horus sphere caught Lady Xanaju's eye. She looked Thea up and down. Descendant of Merlyn, as a chosen one of the Greek gods, are you going to fight the Egyptian gods to the death? Thea nearly cried at the mention of this. She didn't want to. Who knew that the hostile gods she'd encountered were all Egyptian? Coincidentally, they were all from the same family. It felt so unfair, and she had no one to defend herself. Explaining her innocence now, that the Eye of Horus and the divine blood were all gifts from others, she had to be believed. Nodding, she accepted the unfounded claim of being the sworn enemy of the Egyptian pantheon. Lady Xanaju was moved. She shook the weight of the orb and said encouragingly, trading your son's things for your mother's. You're doing a good business. I see you're a worthy junior. This time, I'll do your divination for you, Thea pouted. You think I'm a newbie? Your divination is completely free. She spoke as if she were at a great disadvantage. After receiving her reward, Lady Xanaju wasted no time. Her 10 fingers flicked through the cards, chanting an unknown incantation until her eyes grew white. She finally grasped a card and paused. The card flashed before Thea, revealing a picture of a devil. Before the devil lay an old man, a sword slung at his side. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 224 Diana's first entry into human society. Madame Xanaju examined the cards for a few moments, then said uncertainly, Old man, the key to the demon and the sword is the sword. This person must have been in contact with you. Okay, whatever you think of has nothing to do with me. Dealing with Madame Xanaju was a real challenge. If Thea didn't have some knowledge of the plot and her impressive analytical skills, she'd have no idea she could have found the person based solely on her divination and guesswork. These clues actually led Thea to a certain person, the ninja master. This old man was known as the leader of demons, and coupled with the sword that had severely injured Thea in the original story, several clues pointed to him. Could his sword even absorb magic? Thea immediately wrote the master's name down in her little black notebook, ready to borrow his sword upon returning to the original time and space. As for the location of his cave, Thea felt that anyone could ask Batman, Old Ma, or Talia for the answer. It was still the same question. The master had lived for so many years and had many enemies, all of whom could be connected to Thea. Alright, I should be leaving now. We shouldn't, Lady Xanaju interrupted her thoughts, preparing to open the barrier. As she left, she casually drew a card, her eyes narrowed slightly, and the words on her lips became, We'll see you again. Going, descendant of Merlyn, the surrounding space, like dominoes, artistically collapsed into nothingness, and the casino reappeared in Thea's view. The clamor around her returned, and Thea hurried to check Lady Xanaju's seat, only to find it empty. The casino was bustling with people, but no one seemed to notice the empty seat. Did something just happen? I feel something's wrong. Diana, the demigod, was no slouch. Although she was a novice at this point, far from the heights she would reach a century later, she could still sense something was amiss. Thea could only feign ignorance, and Diana, lacking her later confidence, could only dismiss it as an unfamiliar experience. Although she felt a little pained about giving up the Horus sphere, she received 2 answers. Others might struggle with these illusory divinations, but Thea, who had a reasonable understanding of this world, could use the information she possessed to fill in the gaps in the divination. Lady Xanaju hadn't mentioned a time limit, but it seemed there was one. The sooner it was completed, the better. Thea counted the money she and the others had, and if they lived frugally, it would barely be enough to get to London. But who was she? She'd never sit when she could lie down. She dragged the 2 of them along, buying them plenty of food and clothing. Then, under Diana's speechless gaze and Steve's horrified gaze, she forcibly hypnotized a captain sailing from Crete to Marseilles, France. The 3 of them went straight into the VIP stateroom of the passenger ship. Thea instructed Steve to guard the outside and not let anyone in. She then grabbed Diana and headed inside. While she desperately wanted to find Constantine's family immediately, Diana couldn't let her guard down. She hadn't experienced the pain of her previous timeline, and while her convictions for justice remained undiminished, she had been pulled from the island half willingly and half by Thea, so she didn't have the same reckless drive. Since Thea had pulled her out, She had to take responsibility. First and foremost, the issue of clothing. Anyone would be puzzled by the sight of a woman carrying a sword and a shield, especially in a major city. There was no way some half-witted individual would think she was going to kill someone in public. Thea didn't want to engage in a battle with 20th century police. A change of costume was necessary. Fortunately, they were close friends, and after a brief discussion about the precautions of modern society, Diana readily shed her gear. "You're not wearing anything underneath," Thea said, speechless, as she stared at Diana, now without her armor. "Don't you feel it's uncomfortable?" She reached out and touched Diana's unspeakable possession. While not as soft as cheese, it wasn't as hard as stone either. It was still within the normal range. Why didn't she shiver violently while wearing armor? That's ridiculous. Luckily, underwear already existed in this era. The first bra was invented by a woman named Fimeria in 1914 and quickly became a European phenomenon. Crete, as a hub in the eastern Mediterranean, saw a lot of merchants traveling back and forth, and they bought a lot. Although Thea didn't like the fabric, it was truly luxurious at the time. She picked out the largest size for Diana, instructing her to wear it in battle, but it was best worn at other times. Underwear was easy enough, but outerwear proved more difficult. Because of that damned sexism, almost all stores were stocked with everyday women's clothing. The few that did stock were whalebone skirts with incredibly thin waists. Not to mention Diana's warrior figure, even someone as petite as Thea couldn't fit in. It was said that some noble ladies had to undergo rib surgery to wear them. Thea scoffed. She wasn't that obsessed with it. After searching for no suitable clothes, Steve finally came up with an idea, and Thea bought a whole bunch of denim clothes. Diana breathed a sigh of relief when she realized she wouldn't have to wear dresses, especially when she learned she'd have to cut some ribs. Not bad. Very stylish, Thea said, taking a few steps back. Diana, dressed in denim, had her blonde hair loose, a brown vest over a white shirt, beige pants, and black boots. Diana performed a few punches and kicks on the spot, pleased to find that it didn't affect her strength at all. As for her equipment, Thea had already planned it out. She found a large backpack that could hold everything except the shield, which took up some space. She looked like a hiker, not out of place. When the three of them disembarked in Marseilles, Thea asked Steve, "Mr. Trevor, do you think we should sail around Spain, or take the train to Bordeaux and then find a boat?" Even the most clueless Steve could see that Thea was definitely not a native, especially compared to Diana's inquisitive gaze. He pondered for a moment. "Both are about the same speed. The train is too crowded, your friend," he said, gesturing at Diana. "Okay, let's keep looking for a boat, preferably one that goes directly to England." "Oh my God, Diana, put it down." Thea was conferring with Steve when she suddenly noticed a plump woman holding a baby passing by Diana. Diana's eyes lit up at the sight of the baby. A human baby, like a child discovering a new toy. She quickly scooped the baby up in her arms, jostling its weight, as if to confirm Hippolyta's claim that all babies were angels with wings, and with a whoosh, tossed the baby high into the air. Chapter 225. The magic book is in hand. "Oh my goodness." As the fat woman screamed, Thea leaped forward, catching the fallen baby. She glared at Diana, who looked puzzled, and quickly returned the child to the fat woman. The fat woman refused to give in, shouting non-stop. Thea couldn't understand her distinctly French accent, but she figured it wasn't a welcome invitation to her home. The crowd gathered around her, and Thea couldn't use her suggestion in such a public place. She could only offer gentle words to the fat woman. Unfortunately, they didn't speak the same language, and the fat woman, with her petty cunning, threw a tantrum. Diana seemed to realize she'd gotten into trouble, lowered her head, and silently watched the situation unfold. Thea, with her exceptionally strong memory, had learned a few French sentences from the fat woman's idioms and the surrounding conversations. She hadn't grasped the so-called beautiful language at all. She gritted her teeth, communicating with gestures, and finally, after paying a large sum of colorful international banknotes, she gained the fat woman's forgiveness. "I'm sorry," Diana said, her face livid as she stepped forward to apologize. When Thea finally understood why she'd abandoned the child, she nearly fell to the ground. Hippolyta's habit of talking nonsense was truly deceptive. Luckily, nothing serious had happened. Thea quickly explained the normal course of human life to Diana. As for any conflicts with the Queen's story, she left it to Diana to figure out. After this incident, Thea couldn't leave alone. She'd take her with her for a few days to familiarize herself. Of course, she couldn't just lecture her. Diana might look mature now, but she was a bit of a brat at heart. She needed some reward after some lecturing. Try this. Thea handed Diana an ice cream cone and took one herself. It was ridiculously high sugar, not nearly as good as later generations, but after 6 months of eating wild game on Paradise Island, a little sweetness was a welcome change. In her cheerful mood, Thea waved the ice cream cone toward Steve, inviting him to pick one too. Steve shook his head quickly. What a joke, 2 young girls enjoying ice cream on the romantic streets of France. He, an American deeply influenced by the strict and rigid British culture, couldn't possibly do that. He doesn't know how to enjoy life, Thea muttered, then ignored him, turning her attention to Diana's first experience. Sweets were indeed the perfect weapon against young girls. Regardless of whether she'd lived 5,000 years, Diana was instantly captivated by the delicious ice cream, staring at Thea with gleaming eyes. I want more. For a moment, Eris faded from her mind. Diana felt a sweet taste envelope her mouth, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. Her mental state was naturally observed by Thea. It was incredible. Ice cream helped a demigod confirm her convictions. To bolster her conviction, Thea bought all the ice cream, found a deserted spot, and froze each one with a freeze ray. Although she lacked water attributes and knew no ice magic, she was still able to cast this low-level, almost magical, spell. Steve was no longer surprised by her earth-shattering actions. He calmly watched as her hands froze, freezing the ice cream, and volunteered to carry the huge pile of sweet treats. Thea gave him a look that said, "You're quite sensible." The 3 of them found a ferry bound for London and began their sea voyage. Has your companion not arrived yet? We've been waiting for 2 hours, Steve asked anxiously, leaning against the wall and glancing at the passers-by. She said she had urgent business to go to a place called Liverpool and asked us to wait until sunset, Diana said leisurely, licking her ice cream. Liverpool. It's over 300 kilometers from London. Did she fly there to board the ship at the same time as us? Steve felt that his common sense was being challenged daily after his encounters with these 2 women. Anything unbelievable was commonplace with him. Even though he had the answer in mind, he couldn't help but complain. Who? I finally found you. You're so far away. The breathless voice that came running over was none other than Miss Thea. Shortly after boarding the ship, she told Diana to be careful and flew through the night on her skateboard to Liverpool, the great northwestern port of Britain. Finding a child in such a crowded port city took her considerable time. She manipulated 2 counselors, 7 tax collectors, and 11 gang leaders, finally finding Thomas Constantine, the father of the future John Constantine, through the combined efforts of both the law and the underworld. Thomas was still a child, and with his father killed in action on the Somme, his family was in dire straits. Once they found him, everything went smoothly. As Thea prepared to use her magic, she discovered that while the child showed no signs of awakening magic, his blood possessed a high resistance to magic, instantly negating any attempts at mind control. Using her parliamentary authority, Thea helped Thomas secure his father's pension. Taking advantage of his absence, she infiltrated a Constantine family mansion. The search went smoothly, quickly uncovering 5 thick, black-bound magic books. Fearing the possibility of disrupting the timeline and affecting John Constantine's future, Thea didn't dare pack up all the books and instead copied them. Arranging for several government officials to distract Thomas with trivial matters, Thea worked day and night for 3 days, finally completing the 5 massive tomes passed down from the Constantine family since Arthur's time. While the knowledge wasn't advanced, and far inferior in depth to that of the goddesses chosen, it was nonetheless fundamental. Elemental magic, illusions, summoning, demonology, various rituals, and mystical techniques were all included. Several of the Constantine family's ancestors had traveled the world, recording hidden locations within the pages of their books. Thea simply glanced at these seemingly mysterious places. She wasn't Constantine, and she felt she had enough troubles of her own, so she didn't have the curiosity to bother with demons and monsters. After completing all this, Thea carefully checked and found nothing was missing, so she rushed to London. Originally, the Eye of Horus would have been the most convenient way to find someone, but she was worried about Eris in the city. Who knew if the fluctuations of his divine power would alarm him? So Thea could only rely on a crude method to find him. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like, Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.